Chapter 822, Reading More Books is Good for You. Above all else, Ichigo Kurosaki doesn't just wield the power of the Soul King, he also harbors hollow abilities. This rare fusion of spiritual energies makes him the prime candidate to succeed the throne of souls. He may not yet match the Soul King's raw might, but his untapped potential exceeds it, thanks to his hollow heritage, an asset the Soul King himself lacks. Where the Soul King and the Hollow stand as polar opposites, Ichigo unites four distinct lineages within himself: Shinigami, Quincy, Fullbring, and Hollow. No one since the Soul King has carried so complete a legacy of every species' blood. From the moment of his birth, Ichigo was destined for greatness. His journey to true strength hinges entirely on his understanding of himself. Every power he possesses was within him from the start. It's only by accepting and mastering that inheritance that his strength will finally stabilize and blossom. When someone's power far outstrips what's natural for their world, it's inevitably called cheating. By that measure, Ethan was the ultimate cheat. Hyosubi Ichibei had hoped to find him in time, to exploit him as the wedge that would split the three realms apart. But Esdeath's calm voice cut through his plans. "It's too late," she said, the faintest curve of amusement on her lips. "Ethan has already slipped into the new world." Ichibei frowned. New world? Hadn't they been speaking of the God world? Esdeath's smile turned into a mocking smirk. The three realms of the Soul King collapsed long ago, nothing but void and chaos now. Only the God King's creations remain, Soul City and the God world. And to protect the human race, the God King forged a new world. That's where Ethan went, along with everyone else the Soul King once shepherded. They were all transferred there by the omniscient, omnipotent God King himself. Ichibei's heart sank. He couldn't overturn the God King's designs, no matter how unjust he found them. More troubling still, Ethan would never willingly serve as their wedge. He simply wanted to safeguard whatever he held dear, his friends, his family, and the fragile peace of whatever world he now called home. Chapter: The Burden of the Soul King. Now that peace reigned across the worlds, why did Kurosaki Ichigo still insist on sacrificing himself to become the Soul King? He was someone who cherished the ordinary life, someone content to return to his friends and family, even after wielding unimaginable power. Ethan had reshaped existence itself. In the new order, Soul City became the hub of reincarnation. Departed souls no longer risked corruption by hollows. They passed directly into Soul City. There, malevolent spirits dissolved into spirit particles, weaving themselves into the cosmic balance. Virtuous souls, freed from taint, moved on to fresh lives without impediment. The gods of destruction, once the last line between life and oblivion, now consisted solely of the final hollows and Shinigami. Should another rise to that post, they would remain human, no longer an insubstantial soul. Their sole mission: safeguard Soul City and keep the gates of hell sealed. Ethan himself would not linger here forever. As long as Soul City stood secure, Hell's legions could never surge forth again. In the God world, Ethan introduced the ultimate creation, the Son of God, or God particle. Alongside the instruments and spirit particles, these divine nuclei formed the very fabric of the new cosmos. Yet the Son of God existed only in the realm of deities, a testament to Ethan's vision of a world reborn, eternally protected from the darkness that once threatened all life. Ethan watched in stunned silence as the Council of Destruction reached its verdict. With the gods of destruction formally acknowledged, their most sacred rite could begin. They would ascend the Son of God, and in so doing, forge him into the true God of destruction. The titles and trappings of divinity would pass to him at last, ushering in a new age of cosmic balance and annihilation. But even as the Council spoke of world-shaping power, another decision gripped the remnant officers of the 13th Division of the Gotei. Their fates had been sealed by the very upheaval they'd helped precipitate. Now, each soul in their ranks faced only two paths: serve as sentinels in Soul City, or submit themselves to the twin crucibles of purification and reincarnation. In the purification chambers, even spirits possessed of third-tier spiritual power fared no better than common criminals. The process shattered every last trace of malice and discord, reducing corrupted souls to nothing more than drifting spirit particles. The reincarnation halls were scarcely kinder. Every inhabitant, mortal or immortal, emerged reborn as a pristine soul, bereft of all memory and identity. As the grim realities of Soul City's machinations were laid bare, Ethan saw recruits exchange haunted glances. Some, unable to bear the indeterminate fates of purification or rebirth, voluntarily stepped forward to patrol the city's boundless corridors, locking away wayward souls for eternity. Others chose a different gamble. They would walk through the God Gate and follow the new gods of destruction into the God world itself, staking all on the promise of fresh purpose. And there was yet a final revelation. Ordinary mortals would be forever barred from the God Gate, and residents of Soul City could never cross into the emerging new world. The grand redesign of the cosmos was complete, and in its wake, no soul would be untouched by fear, wonder, or hope in equal measure. For Ethan, watching the boundaries between life, death, and divinity shift so abruptly felt like standing on the edge of creation itself, an earth-shaking transformation that promised both ruin and salvation in its unfolding. Some souls couldn't accept the new order, so they were sent off for purification or rebirth. No spirit particles were ever delivered to hell. Let it try to rise up if it dares. Soul City's decree was ironclad. The seal on hell would only grow tighter, its weight ever increasing. Even Hyoshibu Ichibei, still uneasy, ascended to the god's realm, petitioning to become a destroyer god charged with overseeing this self-sustaining world. He could not bear the thought of leaving any loose ends. But Ethan had already built his new creation to run on its own. He declined to meddle further. If every strand of his design held true, then even the death god world would remain calm and orderly, regardless of his personal indifference. At that moment, the Soul King materialized before him in a swirl of cerulean light. "So you were simply ignorant at first," the king chided. "Had you studied more carefully, you could have solved this problem on your own." Ethan met the Soul King's gaze without flinching. Esdeath, who had once allied with him to temper the world's energies, stood silently at his side, watching the exchange. Ethan watched as the Spirit King materialized before him in perfect form, whole, undiminished. He had reclaimed every fragment of his power. Now at last, he intended to reincarnate. For the Spirit King himself, this was the greatest reassurance. As long as he remained untroubled, hell would hold no further threats. Even more significant, Ethan had eradicated the primordial void at its source. From that moment on, Soul City would absorb wandering souls directly. There would be no twisted, destructive metamorphosis into void beings. Both of the Spirit King's greatest burdens had vanished, and he could finally lay down his eternal duties, a far more fitting outcome than the irrevocable future Ethan had once foreseen. Ethan allowed himself a small, wry smile. "Since you're preparing to reincarnate, why not present me with a token of thanks? After all, you stand to gain just as much as I do." The Spirit King regarded him with calm eyes, fully aware of Ethan's meaning. This rebirth would grant the Spirit King access to the very essence of the void, power he had never before wielded. Finally, he gave a measured nod. "I have nothing else to offer," he replied, "but accept my strength and gratitude." With that, the Spirit King poured every ounce of his power into a single vessel, a crystalline shell brimming with void energy. As the final echoes of that gift faded, he turned and set off for Soul City, ready to begin his next journey. Ethan watched him go, knowing that in uniting their strengths, they had reshaped the cosmos itself and ushered in a peace that would endure for ages to come. Ethan held the Spirit King's jade in his palm, a rare, perfected form of ordinary spirit jade. He examined it one last time to be certain it was flawless, then extended it toward Esdeath. "For you, Esdeath," he said, his tone calm but determined. Esdeath's icy blue eyes widened in surprise as she accepted the jade. She didn't offer so much as a courtesy nod. "Why are you giving me this?" she asked, her voice cool and curious, though her expression remained impassive. Chapter 823, Kryptonians vs. Frieza. Esdeath held the Soul King jade aloft, its pale green light dancing across her gloved fingers. She'd seen Aizen wield the frozen jade before, and knew that, like its counterpart, this gem was no mere trinket. "You underestimate its power," she told Ethan, her voice cool but warning. Ethan, once known as Luther, simply smiled. He could read her thoughts as easily as he breathed, and he'd grown cautious of relying on outside forces ever since his first, and nearly fatal, brush with transcendent power. "Oh?" And how strong is it, exactly? He asked, arching an eyebrow. Esdeath turned the jade over in her hand, watching the runic veins pulse with energy. It amplifies your spiritual energy far beyond ordinary limits, she explained. But the true yield depends entirely on the wielder's own cultivation. A fledgling soul would feel only a fraction of its strength. A master could tap into nearly limitless reserves. Ethan nodded. He knew he didn't need another crystal to augment his abilities. His transcendence placed him leagues above most rivals, but the jade would be a powerful asset in Esdeath's hands. Then take it, he said, offering the gem. If you run into trouble, you know where to find me. A brief, almost imperceptible smile crossed Esdeath's lips. She slipped the jade into her robe and inclined her head in thanks. Together, they stepped out of the Death Realm, leaving its silent expanse behind. In Soul City, the queue for reincarnation stretched farther than even the Soul King had ever seen. Millions of newly departed souls waited patiently to be reborn, their ephemeral forms drifting like mist through the vast plaza. Standing beside the great portal, the Soul King glanced upward, sensing a sudden shift in the flow of spiritual energy. "They're gone?" he murmured to himself. A faint grin crossed his aged features. With Hueco Mundo's collapse, the Hollow's residual power had nowhere left to cling. It dispersed into the ether, weaving itself among the souls here. Now, in this city of rebirth, that scattered energy would mingle with new spirits, an unprecedented convergence that promised to reshape the balance of power in both worlds. The Spirit King had set his sights on this world as a stepping stone. Gather enough power here, and with the combined might of the Spirit King and the Void, he just might cleanse hell itself. He murmured softly, "I don't know if our paths will ever cross again, but to a being like me, this world is merely a roadside vista. You glance once, and you never look back." He sighed and watched Ethan without a word. The young man did nothing extraordinary. He simply lay in the sun, quietly observing the world as it went by. Not even the presence of the god of death stirred him. To Ethan, these divine powers were as remote as a high-dimensional observer looking down on ants. Curiosity, let alone engagement, was out of the question. The Spirit King had intended to introduce him to dazzling beauties and eccentric personalities, yet Ethan remained utterly indifferent. The only spark of interest he showed was for Esdeath, the battle-mad warrior he'd brought along, a woman whose love of combat seemed to be the one thing capable of capturing his attention. Ethan sensed through Esdeath that the Soul King recognized he still harbored emotions, yet it couldn't comprehend why he remained so unmoved. Together, they returned to the Marvel Universe. The jade of the Spirit King that had rested in Esdeath's hand had mysteriously vanished, its power now coursing through her very being. Within her flowed the Soul King's might, the same force Ewok so desperately coveted, only now refined to an even higher degree. Ewok's famed omniscience, it turned out, wasn't truly omnipotent. Only the Soul King's power could bridge that gap. Legend held that the Spirit King wielded both omniscience and omnipotence, one hand propelling time forward, the other sending it spiraling back. But genuine omnipotence isn't so neatly confined. Ethan himself had transcended those boundaries long ago, breaking free of a single universe to claim true all-seeing, all-powerful status. Even so, the Spirit King's power was more than adequate for Esdeath. Every fleeting thought, every private desire could be made real, so long as her ambitions did not exceed certain bounds. Ethan checked his watch. "It's almost time," he murmured. Ethan realized the timing couldn't be better. Frieza from the Dragon Ball universe was already bound for Earth. In this branch of the DC universe, the Kryptonians on New Krypton had been advancing unimpeded for a century. The stage was set for an epic clash, Krypton's greatest warriors versus the universe Emperor Frieza. DC Universe, Terra Star System. When Ethan materialized, he found New Krypton transformed by gleaming crystal towers and spires of purest metal. Yet despite 100 years of local history, only about 6 months had passed on Earth, time dilation caused by the massive star Terra and its neighboring bodies. Ethan's arrival immediately tripped the planet's security protocols. Moments later, a figure in traditional Kryptonian battle armor emerged, a slightly older General Zod. "Inspector," Zod greeted him with a respectful nod. Ethan inclined his head. "Zod, Frieza is on his way. Prepare our defenses." Zod's gray eyes sharpened. We anticipated this war, sir. We are ready, though we never expected to wait a century for it. Ethan allowed a determined smile. Then let's make every second count. If not for the Star of Terra's metamorphic power on every Kryptonian's life, they might never have held out long enough for Ethan's arrival. The Galactic Inspector's sense of time simply didn't match theirs, and yet, a century later, Krypton had forged a mighty legion. 100 years proved more than enough to assemble an army rivaling the glory of Krypton's golden age. Where once their foes enjoyed numerical superiority, General Zod had evened the odds, and then some. Under the steady, unseen influence of the Terra Star, Kryptonian warriors had grown astonishingly powerful. "All right, everyone," Ethan said, "follow me." At his command, General Zod sounded the muster. In moments, thousands of armored soldiers stood assembled beneath the dual suns. From the moment they first opened their eyes, these warriors had been taught by Zod himself that they were destined to be the galaxy's guardians. All their lives, they'd wondered whether the Galactic Inspector would ever arrive. Now that he had come at last, their sense of mission burned brighter than ever. Ethan watched the scene unfold and couldn't help but wonder whether filming the Kryptonians' next invasion of the Marvel Universe would prove especially challenging. After all, their sense of duty was almost overwhelming. He kept his thoughts to himself. Once they were ready, he gave a casual wave, dismissed them, and slipped away. In the blink of an eye, Ethan reappeared in the Dragon Ball universe. There, he spread word of the wish-granting Dragon Balls, and it wasn't long before King Frieza got wind of it. For reasons that struck even Ethan as petty, Frieza was determined to grow exactly 5 centimeters taller. He assembled his elite troops and prepared to depart. Naturally, Frieza couldn't admit such a trivial vanity to his followers. To justify the mission, he proclaimed to the galaxy that he sought immortality. After all, confessing he only wanted a little extra height would have earned him ridicule among his men. Ethan had orchestrated every detail. Frieza remained unaware that Namek also harbored Dragon Balls. He assumed Earth was the sole keeper of the artifacts. And, out of respect for the Namekian Grand Elder who had once shown him kindness, Ethan deliberately sent Frieza's forces to Earth, sparing Namek from yet another ruthless conquest. Now Frieza's armada hangs in orbit above Earth, ready to strike. I'd be happy to help, but I'll need the full text of the chapter you'd like rewritten. Could you please paste the entire machine-translated chapter here, so I can transform it into a polished, idiomatic English version wit? H. Ethan as the protagonist. Chapter 8 and 24, The King in a Baby Carriage. Frieza had recovered all 7 Dragon Balls in less than half a day, thanks to the Dragon Radar. Of course, it helped that Ethan had ordered Dr. Gero to stay put. Otherwise, the entire android army would have swooped in and captured the tyrant. Bulma and her friends had likewise emerged unscathed, and Dr. Gero had handed the radar over without protest. Now beneath a sky painted crimson by the dying sun, Frieza reclined in his opulent, floating baby carriage, a disdainful smile playing at his lips. His 2 most loyal lieutenants, Dodoria and Zarbon, hovered anxiously nearby, every muscle tensed as though even the air around them had frozen. The relentless ticking of the radar sounded unnaturally sharp in the silence. In Frieza's gloved hands, the 7 Dragon Balls glowed fiercely, their combined power coalescing into a beam of blinding light, the final spark needed to fulfill his long-cherished ambitions. But at the very moment when destiny seemed poised to bow to his will, fate had a cruel little twist in store. Just as Frieza was about to close his eyes and make his wish, grow an extra 5 centimeters, thereby boosting his power immeasurably, the sky turned in an instant. Black clouds billowed overhead, and thunder cracked like the roar of a vengeful god. The very air seemed to quake, pressing down on everyone below with an almost tangible weight. "Lord Frieza, something's wrong," one of the lieutenants shouted over the rumble. "Unknown forces are bearing down on us." Every combat power sensor in the area shrieked their alerts. None of the officers had ever seen readings this massive, nor expected an enemy this powerful to strike at such a critical moment. Still, Frieza remained perfectly composed. He lounged in his ornate pod, a playful smile curving his lips as if he'd anticipated this exact scenario. Beside him, Sabo's eyes blazed like twin searchlights, sweeping the roiling clouds for any sign of the approaching army. Frieza raised a single, delicate finger, a silent command to hold their ground and stay calm. "Do not be alarmed," he said softly. "Let them come." Ethan tilted his head, a faint smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Oh, a trap?" His voice was calm, curious about the unknown, yet brimming with unshakable confidence in his own power. In Ethan's mind, aside from the very few foes he deemed his equals, nothing in the cosmos truly frightened him. Even Beerus, the god of destruction, stood on a plane so far above mortals that he scarcely seemed real. "Humph," Ethan continued, "an ant daring to snare me. How amusing. Whoever dares stand in my way is nothing but a stepping stone on my path to conquer the universe." Every word dripped with arrogance, as though no force in existence could halt his march. Then, without warning, the heavens above him seemed to tear apart. A suffocating hush descended, heavy and solemn, driving every head skyward. Through that yawning rift came the sight of General Zod's Kryptonian legions, an army of gods of war reborn from the ancient stars. They poured through the breach as though they had always belonged there, materializing above this unsuspecting blue world. Their arrival was not announced by thunderous roars or blinding explosions, but by a profound, silent inevitability, an overwhelming presence that made every heart in the gathering stand still. Thousands of Kryptonians descended in perfect formation, each movement precise as if guided by clockwork, yet they retained the raw power and fluid grace of living warriors. They streaked across the sky like a blazing meteor shower, leaving behind trails of radiant light, and touched down on Earth one after another. With each landing, the ground trembled slightly, announcing the arrival of an astonishing force. At the head of this formidable host stood General Zod. His muscles were corded and unyielding, as if hewn from the hardest steel, each fiber coiled with latent energy. Intricate runes danced across his armor, catching the light and hinting at secrets older than the stars themselves. Zod's eyes, sharp and piercing as an eagle's, swept over the assembled crowd, and then fixed on a curious sight a short distance away, a sleek, ivory carriage in which sat the infamous Frieza. A flicker of surprise, and no small measure of cautious respect, crossed Zod's face. Could this diminutive captive truly wield the cosmic might to shake the heavens and bend countless worlds to his will? "General," came a measured voice at his side, "according to the intelligence provided by Mr. Vril Dox, Frieza's power level tops even the highest-ranked Kryptonian warriors." Zod's gaze narrowed, the spark of a predator meeting its prize. He raised a gauntleted hand, and the gathered army fell silent. It was one thing to conquer with numbers, it was quite another to face an enemy whose very name struck fear across galaxies. As the tremor in the earth subsided, a deadly hush settled over the plain, an unmistakable prelude to war. General Zod stood over the strategy table, eyes scanning the data streams. "Supervisor," he said crisply, "Frieza's energy attacks are catastrophic. He could obliterate entire planets, even star systems. But his raw physical strength remains surprisingly low. That, more than anything, is the edge our Kryptonian forces will exploit." A Kryptonian research officer at Zod's side stepped forward. His voice was calm, precise, each word delivered like an exacting calculation. "My lord, our combat power sensors have completed a thorough analysis. Their genetic markers don't match any known species in the universe. The closest parallels are Earthlings and Saiyans, but the overlap is only 50%. Even more startling, their average power level measures at 2,000 units. That's well beyond any life form we've ever cataloged from Earth." Across the room, Sabo, Frieza's chief lieutenant, exchanged a tense glance with his superior. "All the same," he said, voice tight with disbelief, "Earth isn't entirely unknown to us. We ran extensive reconnaissance before our departure." General Zod nodded once, steeling himself. "Then we proceed with caution. We've identified their strengths and their weaknesses. Now it's time to turn that knowledge into victory." Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning the tactical readout before him. According to the data, each member of their strike team averaged a combat power of 2,000, enough to dominate any theater in the universe and send conventional armies into full retreat. Even the notorious Frieza Force, which had yet to reach its Dragon Ball Super era heights, shuddered at opponents topping 1,000 in power. At that threshold, their rank-and-file troopers stood little chance. That's precisely why Frieza had always prized the Saiyans above all other soldiers. Not only did they possess raw strength far beyond most beings, but they also exhibited an unparalleled fighting spirit and tactical cunning. While a few cultivators might tap into powers north of 1,000, thanks largely to Earth's uniquely favorable environment, the vast majority of that benchmark. By contrast, the Kryptonians boasted different but equally formidable assets. Their alien physiology granted them incredible strength and bone-crushing durability. They might not unleash the cataclysmic energy blasts typical of some races, but their nearly invulnerable skin and devastating melee prowess made them virtual juggernauts in close quarters. In hand-to-hand combat, few stood a chance against their relentless assault. Ethan closed the dossier, satisfied. With such capabilities united under a single banner, they were poised to reshape the power balance across the galaxy. That unique advantage could very well decide the outcome of the coming battle. Victory or defeat hung in the balance. Extraordinary, Frieza murmured, a playful smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He'd never encountered anything quite like this life form, nor expected to face such overwhelming power on a world so remote. Turning to General Zod, Frieza's eyes gleamed with curiosity. Who is this Wario, R, and what brings him here? General Zod inclined his head, ready to explain the stranger's origins and the pivotal role he was destined to play in the war to come. Chapter 825. The mighty Kryptonian General Zod offered no reply to Frieza's question. As Krypton's greatest warrior and supreme commander, he understood that on the battlefield, words were often superfluous. A soldier's glory and purpose were written into his very genes. Victory and unwavering obedience were all that mattered. With a single, imperious wave of his hand, he issued the command to attack. His low, resonant order rolled across the sky like distant thunder, stirring the Kryptonian ranks as though awakened by some primeval force. Every cell in their bodies pulsed with excitement, brimming with anticipation for the conflict to come. This was no ordinary army, but a cadre of elite warriors, each one steeped in the radiance of Terra, their young and mighty star, for decades. That perpetual solar nourishment did more than sustain them. It granted them strength and potential far beyond mortal limits. Bathed in Terra's golden light, the Kryptonians surged forward, their overwhelming power turning the battlefield into a testament to their heritage and might. Chapter 7. The Unstoppable Warriors of Krypton. Ethan stood at the edge of the training arena, watching the dozen or so Kryptonian soldiers move with uncanny grace. On paper, each of them boasted a combat rating of just over 2,000, but that number was merely a baseline. Their true power lay in the suite of superhuman abilities every Kryptonian possessed. Over the past century, under General Zod's exacting guidance, these abilities had been honed and perfected until each warrior was, in effect, an indomitable god of war. At the heart of every Kryptonian's arsenal was the biological force field. Invisible to the eye, this field provided an almost impenetrable defense against physical blows, energy blasts, and even extreme temperatures. In the heat of battle, it functioned like an ethereal shield, absorbing and dissipating attacks that would annihilate any ordinary combatant. But the force field did more than just protect. It smoothed out shockwaves and dampened sonic booms during high-speed movement, enabling every Kryptonian to traverse the battlefield at supersonic or even hypersonic speeds. Like phantoms, they could appear behind enemy lines, strike with lethal precision, and vanish before their adversaries even registered a threat. Ethan watched as one of the soldiers accelerated from a standstill to a blur, tearing across the arena so quickly that the air itself seemed to ripple in his wake. Super speed was another hallmark of their race, an ability that, coupled with the force field, rendered them virtually untouchable. They could pursue targets across continents in seconds or evade incoming fire by accelerating out of harm's way. General Zod's experiments had further refined these gifts. Through a combination of targeted genetic enhancement and rigorous mental training, he ensured every Kryptonian was not just powerful, but also disciplined. They learned to project their force fields consciously, shaping them into defensive domes, concussive blasts, or even razor-sharp energy blades. Ethan inhaled, savoring the electric charge in the air. He himself was still mastering the finer points of force field manipulation, But under Zod's tutelage, he had already made strides no Kryptonian of his age had ever achieved. It filled him with a fierce pride and a fierce determination, because the universe was vast, and not every world would welcome the coming reign of Krypton. Yet with their hybrid of biology and super science, Ethan and his fellow warriors were ready to assert their dominance. No fortress was too well defended, no army too vast. As Ethan watched a squadron of combat jets buckle in frustration where a single force field blocked their missiles, one truth became clear. The era of vulnerable mortals was ending. The age of Kryptonian supremacy was about to begin. Kryptonians move beyond the limits of ordinary physics. They can shatter the sound barrier at will and push far past it, so that whether they're teleporting a few meters or sprinting across a battlefield in seconds, it feels as natural to them as breathing. This phenomenal speed lets them seize tactical advantages in the blink of an eye and deliver devastating strikes before an enemy even realizes what's happening. And if a threat turns against them, they can vanish just as quickly to safeguard themselves. From childhood, the new generation of Kryptonians undergoes rigorous dodgeball drills in enclosed arenas. Supersonic projectiles fly at them from every direction, and with each hit, the number of balls multiplies tenfold. This relentless training hones their reflexes to superhuman levels. Equally impressive is their raw strength. A fully mature Kryptonian can hoist 10,000-ton boulders as easily as most of us lift a book, bending steel with bare hands. In close-quarters combat, their power is absolute. Any foe who dares meet them head-on risks being neutralized instantaneously. Even more terrifying, the Kryptonians have learned to channel their innate power into ruthlessly efficient attacks that leave their opponents utterly helpless. Frieza's soldiers, unable to harness chi to reinforce their bodies, found their combat armor and energy rifles as fragile as toys or sheets of paper when faced with a Kryptonian's might. Under those blows, they collapsed and disintegrated in the blink of an eye. And that's just the beginning. Kryptonians boast a suite of superhuman abilities, steel-like skin, heat vision, and super breath among them. Their virtually impervious physiques shrug off the deadliest energy cannons without so much as a scratch. When a Kryptonian's eyes flare crimson, a scorching beam of stored solar energy erupts, capable of slicing through steel, rending rock, or even passing through a living body. This heat vision can be tuned for power and range, and the instant they unleash it, any combat power sensor will spike, laying bare the true and terrifying extent of their strength. Thanks to their super breath, the Kryptonians can literally shape the air around them, summoning raging storms or blasting shockwaves that obliterate anything in their path. Up against such power, Frieza's army quickly found itself bleeding on the battlefield. Even their elite fighters, with power levels over 3,000, proved alarmingly fragile and were cut down in droves by these relentless foes. What's more, a Kryptonian whose scanner reads just above 2,000 could, in a real fight, dispatch an opponent rated at 5,000 without breaking a sweat. And traditional power level detectors were utterly useless here. Kryptonians possess innate bio-force fields that hide their true energy signature. When they wish, they cloak their power completely, and if they unleash it, every cell in their body can surge with force many times higher than any scanner can register. "Something's not right about these guys," Commander Sabo muttered, his brow tightening as he watched another squad fall. Dodoria's grin was savage. "Difficult and cruel? You have no idea what we're up against." But both knew they had no choice but to stand and fight. As core leaders of Frieza's army, retreat wasn't an option. Over the comlink, Frieza's voice crackled with cold resolve. "Sabo, Dodoria, now is the time to show our true strength." Even Frieza couldn't deny the crisis looming before him. The Kryptonians were unlike any enemy he had faced, and unless they turned the tide now, Frieza's empire might fall under that gathering storm. Lord Frieza's glare cut through the briefing room's dim light. "If we let these Kryptonians run rampant," he began, voice cold as ice, "our entire legion could collapse overnight. Recruitment standards have slipped so low that we're scraping the bottom of the barrel, relying on auxiliary crews just to locate fighters. Even Dragon Ball Super confirms it's nearly impossible to find someone with a power level of 1,000. He paused, scanning the holo displays of struggling troops and shattered squads. Our veteran technicians have scoured the galaxy for years, dangling hefty rewards for warriors who break that 1,000-point mark. Then those scoring below it are vital to our strength. We cannot tolerate another Kryptonian incursion. Frieza tapped a control pad. 2 golden sigils appeared, Sabo and Dodoria. You two will handle this personally. Strike at the core of their force. Once their leader falls, the rest will scatter. Yes, Lord Frieza, Sabo and Dodoria intoned in perfect unison. In the next instant, they erupted into streaks of violet and crimson light, hurtling toward the heart of the Kryptonian assault, General Zod himself. At the center of the battlefield, Zod stood perfectly still, hands folded behind his back. Sabo's fiery aura flared as Dodoria's purple lightning crackled, yet Zod only offered a faint, contemptuous smile. With an effortless gesture, he extended one hand, and the 2 Saiyan generals found themselves caught in a wave of power that defied belief. The ground trembled. Time seemed to slow. In that suspended moment, the fate of Frieza's legion and the galaxy itself hung in the balance. Bang! Bang! The shots rang out in perfect unison, and in that instant Sabo hurtled to the left while Dodoria was sent flying to the right. Chapter 826, Frieza is defeated. With a single swipe of his hand, General Zod sent Dodoria and Sabo flying. Frieza staggered, eyes wide in disbelief. How could Zod achieve that with just one arm? Dodoria, the pride of Frieza's forces, boasting a power level of 22,000, had always considered himself unbeatable in this universe. Yet the moment Zod's seemingly casual punch connected, all of Dodoria's confidence shattered. Time itself seemed to freeze, and the air around them quivered. A crushing force erupted from Dodoria's chest, hurling him through space like a kite torn from its string. It wasn't merely his body that was flung away, but his very conviction and sense of superiority. Zod moved with quiet, lethal efficiency. His eyes betrayed neither anger nor excitement, only a pure, unadulterated love of combat and an unwavering drive to win. He unleashed no flashy techniques or energy blasts. Instead, he demonstrated masterful control over raw power, suffocating his opponent with sheer force. Dodoria's anguished cry trailed through the air. What? How is this possible? His voice rang with equal parts despair and disbelief, echoing the shattering of everything he had ever believed about his own strength. General Zod moved with impossible speed and precision. Before Dodoria could mount a real defense, Zod's razor-sharp blade flashed through the air. With a single, immaculate stroke, Dodoria's head flew off like a kite cut from its string, vanishing before anyone could fully process what had happened. In its place hung only the faint echo of his life force and the stunned silence of onlookers. How is this possible? Sabo breathed, staring in disbelief. He glanced down at his scouter. General Zod's power reading still hovered stubbornly at 5,000, exactly the same as before. Standing nearby, Frieza maintained his usual imperial composure, but inside, he was reeling. He'd never encountered a fighting style so deceptively simple, yet overwhelming in force, and one that didn't register any surge in power on the scouter. It lay completely outside every rule Frieza's army had ever known. General Zod turned his cold, unblinking gaze on Sabo. The young warrior braced himself, summoning every ounce of ki he had. But in the face of Zod's absolute strength, his struggle was as futile as Dodoria's had been, feeble, desperate, and utterly powerless. A heavy fist crashed into Sabo's face. With a sickening crack, his body flew backward like a sandbag struck by a hammer, tracing a sorrowful arc through the air before smashing to the ground. Every bone seemed shattered. Pain and weakness left him unable even to rise. Frieza's eyes flickered with surprise. So these newcomers have learned to mask their power levels, he muttered. His scouters, designed to gauge strength, had detected nothing, and now he realized how dangerous such hidden abilities could be to the Frieza Force's data-driven tactics. Beside him, General Zod said nothing. There was no place for words on this battlefield. Letting out a low, primal roar, Zod blurred into motion, his form a streak of lightning as he closed the distance to Frieza in an instant. The speed was unlike anything Frieza had ever encountered. Even with his heightened senses, Frieza could barely follow General Zod's rapid advance. He'd never seen anything move so fast. For a moment, he couldn't even react. Instinctively, he leaped out of his battle cart and planted his feet on the ground, But it wasn't enough to evade Zod's crushing blow. Like a meteor striking the surface, the punch connected squarely with Frieza's face, sending him flying. His body slammed into the ground with sickening force, and several of his men who were caught in the blast went down in a tangle of limbs. The pain was unlike anything Frieza had ever felt, and the humiliation cut even deeper. He realized, with bitter disbelief, that he was up against an opponent stronger than anyone he had ever faced, except his brother Gula and his father, King Kurd. Sooner or later, he had expected to meet his match, but never had he imagined it would happen so abruptly, or so decisively. "Damn it, how is this possible?" he snarled, rolling across the ruined earth. Rage and incredulity warred in his chest as he struggled to rise. But General Zod gave him no time to recover. Like a predator reading every move of its prey, Zod closed in again, his eyes cold and unyielding. Frieza braced himself. If he was going to survive this, he'd have to summon every ounce of strength and cunning he had left. Ethan always appeared at the critical moment, stepping into Frieza's range with uncanny timing. With unbreakable fists and lightning-quick kicks, he shattered each of Frieza's assaults in turn, then struck back hard enough to force Frieza to retreat. The air was thick with the scent of gunpowder, and every clash echoed like thunder, bathing the battlefield in blinding light. Frieza felt frustration rising as he measured the distance between himself and Ethan, particularly in speed and reflexes. If he continued trading blows like this, his energy reserves would evaporate, and defeat would be inevitable. He needed a new strategy. Drawing a deep breath, Frieza's muscles swelled, his skin erupting in a dazzling glow. This was his renowned transformation ability, each new form delivering a quantum leap in power. But this time, something was different. A wild, determined light blazed in Frieza's eyes. "Humph! It's time you tasted my true power." With a deafening roar, Frieza's body exploded outward, reshaping itself into an even larger, more fearsome form. Frieza's power exploded outward, the shockwave rippling across the battlefield as if the very planet itself trembled. General Zod's eyes widened at the sudden surge, but his expression stayed as cold and unbreakable as steel. "Go to hell!" Frieza roared, unleashing a violent purple ki blast. He didn't care if the wave vaporized his own troops. His sole target was Zod, the one who had dared to weaken him. In the next heartbeat, Zod slipped past the blast and closed in on Frieza with blinding speed. Their bodies collided with a thunderous crash. "Take this," Frieza snarled, driving his fist into Zod's chest. But Zod's reinforced armor and the biofield he'd perfected through years of research and brutal training absorbed the impact without so much as a dent. Frieza stumbled back, surprise flashing across his face. General Zod stood firm, untouched by the blow, every muscle coiled and ready for the next strike. Chapter 827, Suppression for Kryptonians. The bioforce field is their greatest and most mysterious gift. This unique form of biological energy underpins all of their extraordinary abilities, springing from a special force field emitted by their very cells. At a macroscopic level, the bioforce field can warp the fabric of space itself, counteracting or even reversing the pull of gravity. Thanks to this power, Kryptonians can voyage between planets without rockets or engines and remain perfectly balanced in environments where gravity behaves erratically. On the microscopic scale, the same field safeguards the integrity of every fundamental particle that makes up a Kryptonian body. Under the unrelenting bombardment of high-energy particle storms, or within the heart of quantum turbulence, this field prevents molecular collapse or disintegration. In effect, it preserves their body's structure and function, no matter how extreme the conditions. This dual capability, manipulating gravity across light years and stabilizing subatomic matter in quantum chaos, is what makes the bioforce field so vital to a Kryptonian's survival and power. Ethan braced himself as Frieza's fist rocketed toward him. In the heartbeat before impact, his Kryptonian bioforce field flared to life. Remarkably pliable, it stretched outward like an invisible cocoon. The punch struck nothing but that unseen barrier. The field absorbed and redirected the kinetic energy, breaking the blow down gently, much like ocean waves eroding a reef, until the raw force transformed into a soft pulse of energy that flowed harmlessly back into Ethan's body. This swift, seamless defense is known on Krypton as the strike reaction field. It isn't a fluke of physiology, but the product of over a century of dedicated research and training. Kryptonians have long understood that their bioforce fields can envelop nearby objects and grant them increased strength, stability, and resistance to damage. By combining rigorous stress response drills with advanced energy control technologies, they've learned not only to shield themselves, but also to amplify their fields to extraordinary effect. Ethan's training regimen pushes him to the absolute limit, physically and mentally. Every exercise is designed not only to hone his strength and speed, but to forge an ironclad will, so that when danger strikes he can summon his biological force field in an instant, whether for defense or counterattack. In one advanced module, Ethan steps into a holographic combat arena where he faces a relentless stream of simulated adversaries. Each encounter forces him to recognize attack patterns in the blink of an eye and raise his shield at precisely the right moment. More than a test of reflexes, this drill demands unwavering focus and split-second judgment. Under the glare of the simulation, Ethan learns that only a calm, resolute mind can make the correct choice when every second or mistake could mean life or death. Meanwhile, Kryptonian scientists continue to push their own limits. By marrying biotechnology, quantum physics, and advanced energy studies, they've unlocked new methods to enhance the innate force field that protects their people. From wearable amplifiers that strengthen field coherence to energy converters that recycle ambient power back into the shield, their innovations promise to elevate every Kryptonian warrior's natural defenses to levels never before seen. As Ethan completes another grueling session, he knows that both his personal discipline and his world's cutting-edge research will be crucial in the battles to come. From basic energy amplifiers to sophisticated force field regulation systems, Kryptonian technology has revolutionized their warriors' effectiveness in combat. General Zod's armor, like that of other elite Kryptonians, channels these advances to magnify his already immense power. When Frieza's fist slammed into Zod's biofield, every joule of energy was instantly absorbed, and the momentum of the fight shifted. Zod drew in a steady breath as the stolen energy surged through him, seamlessly merging with his own reserves. His eyes blazed with confidence, as though he already foresaw victory. In a flash, Zod unleashed his counterpunch. His bioforce field transformed the captured energy into raw kinetic force, concentrating it behind his fist. The result was more than just Zod's deadly strength. It carried the full velocity of Frieza's original blow, doubled and redirected. The impact detonated with a thunderous roar, lighting the battlefield like a newborn star. In the blink of an eye, Zod's amplified strike slammed into Frieza, demonstrating the terrifying potential of Kryptonian warfare. Frieza's body traced a long, unbroken arc through the air, spinning out of control like a planet struck by a meteor. He fought desperately to right himself, but the sheer force of Zod's blow surged through him, leaving him helpless. After tumbling in midair several more times, he finally managed to level out, but his face was twisted in shock, fury, and disbelief. He shook his head, trying to clear the lingering vertigo, yet the image of that punch replayed relentlessly in his mind. General Zod's strike wasn't a crude display of raw power. It was a masterful application of his bioenergy field, channeling every ounce of force directly into Frieza's body. Rather than letting the energy dissipate in midair, Zod focused it with surgical precision, driving straight to the core of his target. Even Frieza's legendary defenses couldn't shrug off such a calculated assault. The damage was profound. Frieza's strength was staggering. Every inch of his skin shimmered with energy, forming what seemed like an impenetrable barrier. Yet even that near-perfect defense faltered under General Zod's blow, his fist charged with a biological force field. The punch didn't outright knock Frieza unconscious, but the force drove into his bones, jolting his skull and leaving him staggering, vision swimming as though he'd suffered a concussion. Zod blinked in surprise. He'd expected sheer power to be a weakness, but Frieza's body was far tougher than he'd imagined. He shrugged off the thought and steeled himself for the next strike. Frieza recovered quickly and thrust out his hand, unleashing a crackling wave of energy. Zod leapt back just in time as the blast roared past. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, Zod reappeared at a safe distance. His eyes flared bright red, beams of searing heat vision slicing through smoke and flames. The lasers locked onto Frieza's form, cutting through the eruption of debris and striking him squarely. A pained scream tore from Frieza's throat as the heat vision scorched not just his flesh, but his very soul, inflicting a torment he had never known. Zod stood unmoved, his crimson gaze unwavering, ready for whatever came next. Ethan mustered every ounce of his strength and threw up a shimmering shield, determined to block General Zod's fatal assault. But Zod's heat vision proved far too powerful. The searing beam sliced straight through Ethan's barrier, hurling him backwards with bone-jarring force. When he finally landed, all that remained was a scarred patch of earth and the acrid scent of charred metal and burning flesh hanging thick in the air. Chapter 828. Frieza's Weakness. Frieza was still reeling from embarrassment, his body barely stabilizing, when General Zod materialized behind him like a phantom. Before Frieza could even react, Zod drew in a deep breath and then exhaled. The air itself seemed to crystallize, a torrent of super-cold breath so intense it approached absolute zero. This wasn't merely a drop in temperature, it was a force that could erode the very fabric of matter and stall the flow of time. Even Steppenwolf's feared blade, an instrument that had sent tremors through countless worlds, lost its edge against that freezing gale. Its gleaming steel dulled and grew brittle, as if reduced to a wafer-thin shard of winter ice, ready to shatter at the slightest impact. Frieza, as the leader of the Frozen Demon Clan, prided himself on his immunity to cold. Yet none of his defenses had prepared him for this. The super-cooled air engulfed him in an instant, weaving a lattice of crystalline frost across his flesh. Time seemed to halt as ice spread outward, sealing him in a prison of eternal winter. Bound and immobilized, Frieza realized with growing horror that he had finally met a foe colder than himself. Beneath the ice, a flicker of surprise, and even reluctance, crossed Frieza's eyes. He suppressed it almost at once with sheer force of will. As a sign of the Frozen Demon Clan, he was naturally immune to extreme cold. Even temperatures near absolute zero left him only mildly uncomfortable, not immobilized. With a sudden crack, the ice bonds shattered, and he stood free once more. Frieza raised his hand and unleashed a cataclysmic energy wave, an all-consuming blast powerful enough to obliterate a planet, aimed straight at General Zod. Ever the consummate warrior, Zod adapted instantly. His black battle armor seemed to come alive, melding with his flesh to form an impervious shield. At the same time, his potent bioenergy field flared, dissecting the planet-destroying wave layer by layer until its destructive force was reduced to nothing. Even General Zod's formidable defenses wobbled under the force of Ethan's assault. Energy rippled across the black armor's surface, flaring and twisting at a frantic pace, as if the whole suit might shatter at any second. Then came the cataclysmic boom, a roar so immense it shook the very fabric of the universe. Zod himself was slammed like a fallen leaf in a cosmic gale, his body hurled across the void before crashing far away. The once lustrous plating dimmed, its bioenergetic field flickering in chaotic spasms under the crushing pressure. Inside the suit, power reserves spiked to a staggering 500%, forcing raw energy to vent explosively into the surrounding space and tearing at reality itself. Yet even amid the devastation, Zod's mind remained crystal clear. His thoughts raced like a hyper-advanced supercomputer, instantly replaying every moment of the battle and recalibrating his next move with ruthless precision. Ethan's supercharged brain processed the entire fight in an instant, and 3 critical observations crystallized before him. First, Frieza's freezing breath barely slowed him. Its effect was negligible. Second, Frieza's energy blasts were devastating. Should he ever unleash his full power, the fallout would be catastrophic. Finally, despite Frieza's raw strength, he was surprisingly unskilled at close-quarters combat, an opening Ethan intended to exploit. Abandoning long-range attacks that were proving useless, Ethan swiftly overhauled his strategy. Relying on his lightning speed, keen perception, and expert hand-to-hand prowess, he closed the distance in a heartbeat. In a single, fluid motion, he materialized at Frieza's flank like a ghost, kicking off an electrifying melee. Every punch and kick struck with the force of thousands of pounds, yet landed with surgical precision, as if Ethan could foresee Frieza's every twitch and counter before it even began. Ethan's punch was infused with the unique energy of his biological force field, a force capable of slicing clean through Frieza's chi-def, onces, and striking his body directly. Each blow drove Frieza backward, bruising him black and blue. No matter how tightly Frieza wove his energy barriers, Ethan's assaults pierced them, hammering away until the tyrant could barely stand. On both offense and defense, the biological force field proved devastatingly effective. Frieza had long been accustomed to preying on weaker opponents. His raw power was immense, but he had never squared off against a veteran soldier like Ethan, battle-hardened, disciplined, and cunning. Against such an adversary, Frieza simply could not gain the upper hand. "You insolent worm," Frieza hissed through clenched teeth, staggering on wounded pride. Never before had anyone so thoroughly dominated him at close range. Refusing to yield, he roared and let his body swell, bones cracking into a more monstrous shape. In an instant, he shed his second form and burst into his fearsome third. The transformation warped his features into something uglier and more bestial. Yet the surge in raw strength was undeniable. Claws flexing and crimson gaze blazing, Frieza raised himself for a counterattack. But even in this new form, he'd already learned one bitter truth. Underestimating Ethan could cost him dearly. "Now that I've cast off that burden, I feel lighter than ever," Frieza rumbled, his deep voice striking every listener like a hammer blow. His aura flared, warping the very air around him. General Zod staggered back several paces, his expression momentarily blank. Snapping out of it, Zod lunged forward again, but Frieza was ready. In an instant, he matched Zod's speed, their fists colliding with a thunderous crack that sent shockwaves rippling across the ground. The sky above twisted into swirling shades of purple and black, the stars themselves seeming to dim under the weight of their conflict. Bioforce field and ki clashed in brilliant bursts of light, each detonation echoing like a deafening roar throughout the battlefield. With a flick of his wrist, Frieza aimed a single finger at Zod's armored chest, intent on piercing the suit and torturing his adversary. But Zod's bioforce field, honed by a century of Terra's sunlight, proved far stronger than Frieza anticipated. The moment his fingertip touched the barrier, a violent backlash surged through his arm, nearly ripping his finger free. "What?" Frieza's voice cracked with disbelief. Before he could recover, General Zod seized the moment and unleashed a brutal barrage of punches. Each crushing blow drove Frieza backward, over and over, until Zod's final earth-shattering uppercut sent him careening through the air. Frieza smashed into the ground hundreds of meters away, kicking up a towering plume of dust and rock. The impact's shockwave rippled across the battlefield, rattling the earth beneath their feet. Chapter 829, Final Form. Frieza refused to concede. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth as he snarled and hauled himself to his feet, his eyes blazing with deranged resolve. But the duel was far from over. Suddenly, the air above the battlefield seemed to quiver, as though an unseen curtain had fallen across the sky. From the shifting light and shadow, General Zod emerged like a phantom, silent, swift, and lethal. He moved with the precision of a seasoned predator, his approach heralded only by the faintest ripple in the atmosphere. Zod understood all too well that any misstep against Frieza, the self-proclaimed emperor of the universe, could mean instant death. With near sculptural poise, he struck. In a heartbeat, Zod's iron-hard hands clamped around Frieza's indestructible neck, squeezing with the strength granted by iron will and unyielding discipline. Time itself seemed to freeze. The roar of battle faded to an eerie hush, even the wind stilled. In that suspended moment, only the violent contest between conqueror and conqueror remained, a clash so fierce it threatened to tear the very fabric of space. General Zod's eyes betrayed neither fear nor hesitation, only an unyielding resolve to win. He understood all too well that against a cosmic tyrant like Frieza, ordinary tactics were as futile as trying to shatter a boulder with an egg. So he made a bold choice. Strike directly at Frieza's weak points and end this war with brutal efficiency. Frieza's response came as a hoarse, ragged gasp, each word a struggle squeezed from between his clenched teeth. He had never imagined he could be bested, and certainly not by a warrior from such a low-level world. The sheer humiliation ignited a furious blaze of pride within him, summoning reserves of power he had long held in check. General Zod felt that terrible energy swelling around his foe, but he refused to falter. He drew in a steady breath, feeling every muscle in his body tighten and pulse with new strength. A titanic force surged through him, as though it would shatter his mortal bounds and unleash pure destruction on the battlefield. With a thunderous roar, General Zod seized Frieza by the throat and twisted with relentless force. His movements were swift and merciless, every muscle straining with the promise of victory and the fury he bore for his foe. Under Zod's crushing grip, Frieza's mutant armor and limbs, once sources of terrible pride, cracked and splintered like fragile porcelain, the sickening grind of bone on bone echoing through the field. Trapped beneath Zod's biological force field, Frieza's ki was useless. He couldn't break free. Just as Zod prepared to deliver the final blow, Frieza unleashed an astonishing surge of power that rippled through space itself. In a blinding flash, he transformed into his ultimate form, far more terrifying than any before. His hardened shell tore away in jagged plates, falling like discarded serpent scales, and beneath it lay a grotesque, more formidable body pulsing with raw energy. The ground trembled as Frieza, reborn in his final state, stood poised to turn the tide of battle. Ethan's body shifted, becoming both leaner and more powerful. His skin deepened to a regal purple, and intricate veins of starlight snaked across his flesh, as if the cosmos itself beat beneath his skin. This was no mere change in appearance, it was a quantum leap in strength. A ferocious gust of energy burst outward from him, a shockwave so violent it bent space and made distant stars flicker in dread. General Zod was caught in the blast. He was hurled backward, crashing into the ground a full kilometer away. Ethan stood unmoved, exuding the aura of a demon returned from the depths of hell. Every fiber of the battlefield seemed to recoil at his presence. Slowly, he turned. His eyes blazed like twin torches as he fixed his gaze on the stunned general. A cold, triumphant smile curved his lips. "You should consider yourself privileged," Ethan intoned, his voice low and magnetic, "to be the first to witness my true form." Each word rolled off his tongue with undeniable authority, an echo of the abyss itself. A cold, contemptuous smile curved at the corner of Frieza's lips, an expression that spoke of his utter indifference to life and his absolute faith in his own power. "You've earned my full attention by forcing me to reveal this form," he declared, his voice humming with dark anticipation. At his words, the battlefield seemed to hold its breath. Every warrior's gaze, friend and foe alike, locked onto Frieza and the stalwart figure of General Zod, awaiting the strike that would decide their fate. Leisurely, Frieza lifted a single finger. The gesture was deceptively simple, yet it brimmed with world-shattering might. At his fingertip, a searing beam of pure energy coalesced, the very essence of his strength, potent enough to rent space itself and incinerate stars. "Now," he continued, his tone cold and unyielding, "let me show you what true hell looks like." With that, the beam tore free, hurtling forward like an arrow from a cosmic bow. It sliced through the air at faster-than-sound velocity, its radiance crackling with the promise of utter annihilation as it bore down on General Zod. Its destructive force capable of erasing entire galaxies in a single stroke. A searing beam of light ripped through the darkness, illuminating everything in its path, and revealing General Zod's steely, determined expression. Zod's eyes flared with unwavering resolve. He knew there was no evading this lethal strike. He could only stand his ground and meet it head-on. Summoning every ounce of his strength, he focused his power between his eyes and expelled a blistering blast of heat vision. The two forces collided in midair with an earth-shaking roar. It wasn't merely a clash of energy, it was a duel of souls and of convictions. The resulting shockwave tore through space at breathtaking speed, shattering distant stars and scattering nebulae as though the entire universe quaked with the impact. Light and flame intertwined into a chaotic storm, engulfing everything around them. At the heart of this roaring inferno, General Zod and Frieza remained locked in their confrontation, stalwart figures on the brink of both annihilation and renewal. Yet Frieza was far from finished. With a casual flick of two fingers, he unleashed not one but twin death beams, far swifter and more devastating than before, racing toward Zod with merciless precision. General Zod couldn't dodge in time and was struck. Chapter 830, Nuclear Fusion, Solar Flare. A cataclysmic burst of nuclear fusion energy erupted, flinging General Zod clear out of Earth's atmosphere and into the depths of space. Frieza showed no mercy. He let loose a volley of death beams, determined never to let Zod slip away. Unlike most life forms, Frieza was born to survive and fight in the harshest environments. The freezing void and utter silence of space were nothing but scenery for him. As his searing beams smashed into Zod's bioforce field, the very fabric of the cosmos seemed to shudder. Stars flickered and dimmed under the impact, and an ear-splitting boom rang across the vacuum. Light and raw energy intertwined into a blazing inferno that danced like dawn colliding with dusk. Yet Zod's bioforce field held astonishingly firm. Though it quaked under the onslaught, it absorbed the bulk of the attack, granting the general a vital moment to catch his breath before the next strike. Seizing the moment, General Zod harnessed the unique properties of his biological force field to redirect the explosion's residual energy. Riding that thrust, he arced gracefully away from the blast's epicenter, then flashed across space with Kryptonian super speed, aiming straight for Frieza. With a thunderous impact, Zod's fist rocketed into Frieza's face like a speeding meteor, but to his astonishment, his blow met nothing but empty air. Frieza hadn't budged. A mocking sneer curled the tyrant's lips, his contempt for Zod's display of power plain. Before Zod could recover, Frieza's form blurred beside him. In an instant, one hand shot out and clamped around Zod's throat like an unbreakable iron vice. Frieza's eyes glittered with frosty malice as his fingers tightened. Though Kryptonians can live without breathing, the crushing pressure stole Zod's breath, and his face drained of color. A surge of primal panic ripped through him. He thrashed and strained, desperate to pry Frieza's grip from his windpipe. But Frieza's strength was far beyond anything Zod had ever encountered. Ethan fought with every ounce of strength he had, but Frieza's grip held fast. Desperation welled up inside him, and suddenly his eyes flared crimson as a searing heat vision ignited within. He didn't hesitate. He unleashed a blistering beam of pure heat at point-blank range, hoping to break the stalemate. Frieza snarled, a flicker of fear in his cold eyes, and twisted his body out of the beam's direct path. At the same moment, he unleashed a violent storm of ki that swept the heat vision aside like debris in a whirlwind. Then, with a cruel smile, he tightened his grip. Ethan's arms grew heavy, his gasps turned ragged, and it seemed as though the light of life would be snuffed out at any moment. But in that dire instant, Ethan's superlative Kryptonian mind raced through calculations at lightning speed. He knew there was only one way to turn the tide. Summoning every last reserve of will, he activated the pinnacle of a century's worth of Kryptonian scientific achievement, solar flare mode. In an instant, his eyes blazed with the intensity of 1,000 suns, and the battlefield would never be the same. Unlike Superman's improvisational solar flare, Kryptonians can masterfully focus vast stores of solar energy and unleash it in an instant through rigorous training and precise control of their biological force fields. Superman's version turns him into a humanoid star bomb, capable of erasing opponents in the blink of an eye. General Zod's technique, by contrast, is a meticulous cellular fusion. He compresses the yellow sun radiation he's absorbed into a hyperdense core and then releases it all at once. At Zod's will, his body ignites like the heart of a newborn star. Golden light pours from every pore, dancing off his dark armor as though it were molten lava, both awe-inspiring and terrifying. That radiance carries enough force to tear the very fabric of space, making the world around him feel delicate and unreal. In that moment, General Zod's presence reaches its zenith, his gaze burning with unwavering resolve, and cosmic insight, as if he can sense the universe's most infinitesimal tremors. Ethan's transformation happened in an instant. His muscles bulged and tightened, suffused with explosive energy, like a caged beast on the verge of ripping its restraints apart. Yet he knew this power carried a terrible price. Once solar flare mode was engaged, the aftermath would cripple him: massive cell rupture, total energy depletion, and a collapse into unprecedented weakness. In this life-or-death moment, though, he had no choice but to go all in. He swung his leg, and in a flash of golden lightning, he closed the gap to Frieza. His sidekick struck with earth-shattering force, not merely a display of raw strength, but a fierce contest of wills. The very fabric of space seemed to buckle and tear, jagged black fissures rending the air, a stark testament to how the laws of the universe could be pushed beyond their limits. Ethan moved so quickly that the very air around him seemed to stiffen, and time itself appeared to slow. In a blur of motion, his toe struck Frieza's raised arm with such force that reality itself fractured, a jagged black rift tearing across the fabric of space. Frieza reeled backward, blood draining from his face. He slammed into the void like a meteor, internal injuries racking his body. For the first time, the tyrant tasted real pain and fury unlike anything he'd ever known. A roar of rage tore from his throat as he unleashed every ounce of power he had been holding back. In an instant, Frieza achieved 100% release, his true form, his genuine might, surging to over 100 million in battle power. Before now, Frieza had kept his full strength in check. He'd never needed it all at once, and feared the strain it would place on his body. But with this new, limitless fury, he became a living thunderbolt, streaking through the cosmos. Each of his appearances rippled with destructive shockwaves, pulverizing stars and shattering asteroids as he pursued Ethan. Between them, the clash of cosmic energies flared brighter than any supernova. Galaxies seemed to tremble as these two titans unleashed wave after wave of overwhelming power. Yet even this celestial spectacle was merely the prelude. Then, in the heat of their battle, their fists met. The collision was so absolute that time itself froze. Every pulse of energy, every crackle of warp, dissolved into a profound, silent instant. For one heartbeat, the universe held its breath. And in that frozen moment, the true scale of their struggle, of Ethan's courage and Frieza's malice, hung suspended in the void. When Ethan and his opponent met, there was no deafening explosion. Instead, space itself quivered, as though even the heart of the universe had been shaken by their clash. Chapter 31. Mathematics Will Not Lie. Mottled streams of light intertwined around Frieza and Zod, painting the void with a series of surreal tableaux. These luminous currents were more than mere energy. They blossomed into dazzling fireworks one instant, illuminating the darkness, then transformed into razor-sharp blades the next, slicing through the fabric of space and time. All around them, black fissures twisted and expanded, a silent cosmic warning. These cracks yawned like the gaping maw of an abyss, ready to swallow any force that dared approach. Even the brilliance of distant stars and the mass of mighty planets felt insignificant before those ravenous voids. Bound and fueled by this cataclysmic stress, both warriors saw their powers surge beyond every previous limit. Frieza's aura flared with blistering intensity, while Zod's form coalesced into a figure of raw, unbridled energy. Together, they seemed poised to shake the very foundations of existence itself. Then, with a roar that reverberated across the cosmos, the black rifts finally succumbed to the overwhelming power and erupted. A shockwave of unimaginable force burst outward, heralding the next stage of their titanic clash. Ethan watched in stunned silence as the energy wave tore across the battlefield like a raging tsunami. In its wake, every solid thing simply vanished. Even starlight dimmed before the onrush of power, and the planet's once impervious crust shattered into dust and jagged fragments. Space and time themselves unraveled, warped and chaotic, as if the universe's most fundamental laws were being bent beyond recognition. Yet the devastation proved strangely short-lived. As the wave's fury slowly ebbed, the field of battle revealed an intricate new pattern of damage. Delicate fissures spread out like a web of silver threads, sheathing every surface in a lattice of cracks. These were more than mere fractures in the terrain. They were the visible echoes of chaos and order warring at the heart of reality. And through it all, an unseen force moved to heal the breach. It was the universe's own self-repair mechanism, tirelessly working to stitch space back together and restore the balance. But no sooner would one fissure smooth out than another unseen power would surge through, tearing it open again and plunging the battlefield back into turmoil. The fragile equilibrium between Frieza's fleet and General Zod's forces made it painfully clear. This war was far from over, and neither side would yield easily. High above the planet, starships traded deadly volleys of energy, but on the ground Frieza's once proud legionnaires were cut down in droves, like withering leaves swept away by an autumn gale, under the relentless onslaught of Kryptonian warriors. These Kryptonians, particularly the veteran corps led by Fiora, were awe-inspiring. Their strength and speed defied anything ordinary, and a century ago the mysterious glow of the Terra Star had elevated both their bodies and minds to levels few could rival. None of them possessed quite the raw, terrifying might of General Zod, yet each was more than a match for nearly every other champion in the universe. In fact, their overall power bracket sat alongside Zod's own. If Zod stood as the super heavyweight champion, they ranged from flyweights testing his guard to heavyweights trading blows without ever giving ground. Genetic edge or not, the gap between them was narrower than anyone had anticipated, and every one of those veterans was determined to close it. Research-oriented Kryptonians play an indispensable role on the battlefield. Not only do they possess extraordinary intellect, but they also harbor an insatiable curiosity and an unceasing drive to unravel the universe's mysteries. During the lull in combat, they turned their full attention to the shattered remains of Frieza's army, wrecked starships and weapon systems that once stood as paragons of advanced technology. To these scholars, the ruins were far more than debris. They were a treasure trove of secrets waiting to be unlocked, each fragment a potential leap forward for Kryptonian science. Ivan, one of the foremost research specialists, moved methodically among the twisted hulls. His eyes flickered with excitement as he traced the elegant lines of alien circuitry embedded in an engine core half buried beneath scorched plating. Frieza's engineers had achieved a level of precision and innovation rarely seen even on Krypton. Ivan carefully cataloged every alloy sample, every data crystal, and every schematic fragment, knowing that each specimen could yield insights powerful enough to revolutionize his people's technological landscape. With each discovery, he felt the promise of a stronger Krypton and the hope of new breakthroughs that could safeguard his world for generations to come. Ivan's brow furrowed as he studied the battle data. Frieza's personal strength is off the charts, he said, but he's completely neglected upgrading and training his troops. Tapping the holo display, he added, he must believe his own might will carry the entire Legion's reputation, yet true power never stands alone. A second scientist frowned. An army organized like this simply can't hold up in interstellar warfare. Around them, the Kryptonian research team had begun salvaging Frieza Legion vessels, downloading every scrap of technical information they could find. One of the Kryptonians spoke up. This is also why Frieza has held sway over such a vast region. He rules by fear and his own supremacy, not by fielding a disciplined force. In a slugfest like today's, that arrogance becomes a liability. As the team pored over incoming reports, Fiora's voice cut through the hum of machinery. Keep scanning these wrecks and stay on high alert. There may still be pockets of Frieza's troops out there. I'm heading into space to reinforce General Ethan. The fighting up there is just as fierce. Without another word, Fiora's aura flared into a brilliant cascade of light. In a heartbeat, she rocketed skyward and vanished from sight. Ethan stood at the edge of the laboratory's observation deck, arms folded, as the lead analyst ran the latest scan. Frieza's power level is off the charts, she announced, tone taut with awe. By raw energy output alone, not even a full-rank general could stand against him. He nodded, though his brow furrowed. The Kryptonians had long since mastered the theory behind combat power detectors, but the inner workings of Frieza's instruments defied everything they knew. Every schematic they decrypted, every data log they parsed, only deepened the mystery, as if Frieza's engineers and their own operated on two entirely separate branches of science. For days, teams of Kryptonian scientists had combed through wreckage salvaged from Frieza's Legion vessels, desperate to reverse engineer the technology. They cracked open control arrays and probed energy cores, yet time and again they encountered principles that wouldn't reconcile with any Kryptonian model. The frustration in the lab was palpable. A senior researcher finally exhaled, shoulders sagging. Their tech might as well come from another dimension. We can't even identify the basic processes behind their force projection matrices or their energy modulators. Ethan studied the silent consoles, each one flickering with alien code. He met the scientist's worried gaze with steady resolve. Then we tackle it from the ground up, he said quietly. We learn, we adapt, and we'll turn this unknown into our strength. It's like deciphering a text written in an entirely foreign tongue, Ethan said, staring at the readouts in astonishment. Indeed, his fellow Kryptonian replied. Their technological evolution has followed a path we never anticipated. Ethan leaned closer to the holographic display, his eyes alight with both wonder and determination. He'd always known that mathematics formed the universe's truest, most universal language, the logic underpinning every star, every atom. Yet the comparative data shimmering before him revealed a startling truth. Even on that shared mathematical foundation, humanity's tie-ins, and engineering principles diverged from Krypton's in ways both subtle and profound. He eased back and crossed his arms, studying the array of schematics and formulas. On Krypton, power generators thrummed with crystalline energy fields. Here on Earth, reactors relied on fuel rods and chemical catalysts he barely recognized. Their propulsion systems eschewed the gravity wave corridors favored by his people, instead harnessing combustion and magnetohydrodynamics in a way that felt almost primitive, yet undeniably effective. A thrill of excitement ran through him. If two civilizations could arrive at such different solutions to the same universal problems, what else could they learn from one another? Ethan tapped a control pad, zooming in on a particularly intricate set of equations. The symbols twisted and branched in patterns he'd never encountered, but the underlying structure, vector matrices, field equations, conservation theorems, remained unmistakably familiar. Mathematics was eternal, he reminded himself. Its principles did not belong to any one world. And now, standing on the threshold of interplanetary collaboration, Ethan sensed that he was witnessing the birth of a new scientific era, one that would reshape both Krypton and Earth forever. Chapter 832, Siege. Ethan and Krypton's leading scientists were beginning to realize they were on the brink of a revolution, one so profound that it threatened to overturn their entire understanding of technology. While Ethan carefully scrutinized the decrypted data captured from Frieza's fleet, his colleagues turned their instruments outward, probing the vastness of space itself. They understood that the universe was anything but a tranquil sea. It was a colossal arena, brimming with hidden forces and unpredictable variables. Beneath the serene sweep of starlight lay an intricate network of energy, its currents carried across light years by gravitational waves, weaving together the cosmos's most delicate tapestry. Dark matter, mysterious, unseen, and accounting for roughly 85% of the universe's mass, permeated every region of space, subtly influencing the laws that govern even the tiniest particles. Employing Krypton's most sensitive detectors, Ethan's team sought to catch the faintest tremors in this cosmic web. What they discovered was astonishing. Minuscule fluctuations in energy that, once triggered, could cascade through the quantum realm and fundamentally alter how elementary particles behaved. This was more than an academic curiosity. It was the first glimpse of a technological frontier that could reshape the fate of worlds. This breakthrough forced Kryptonian scientists to confront a startling truth. Any civilization confined to a single galaxy will, in time, run headlong into these cosmic hurdles as it pushes its technology ever further. As a result, the new priority for Kryptonian research became the design of adaptive systems, technologies capable of responding in real time to the galaxy's shifting physical conditions. They began to suspect that those very cosmic phenomena might explain why their own civilization lagged so far behind the Frieza Corps. Because they had never mastered inter-universal travel, the Kryptonians could not recognize these anomalies as manifestations of universe-spanning boundaries. They simply chalked them up to peculiar quirks unique to their galaxy. So when the Frieza Corps' mission data arrived, the scientists were rocked by revelations they had never imagined. On the surface, the Frieza Corps' technology appeared crude, an arsenal of brute force weapons and unpolished devices. Yet a closer look revealed an astonishing depth of material control, highly efficient energy release systems, cutting-edge bioengineering techniques, even methods of reshaping living tissue at the cellular level. Each achievement was a fearless probe into nature's ultimate limits. By comparison, Kryptonian advances had always emphasized precise manipulation of cosmic laws, the fine-tuned calibration of energy flows and gravitational fields. They excelled at controlled, predictable outcomes, but they had never dared to explore the raw, untamed edges of material science the way Frieza's engineers did. Now, equipped with evidence of this radically different approach, the Kryptonian scientific community faced a new challenge, not only to refine their own mastery of the cosmos, but to embrace that spirit of bold experimentation they had long dismissed. Quantum computing, space-folding technology, and advanced energy management have not only given the Kryptonians a decisive edge in interstellar travel and resource exploitation, but have also deepened their grasp of the universe's fundamental laws. Yet this very precision and sophistication make Kryptonian inventions seem overly idealized and all too fragile when faced with the cosmos's shifting, unpredictable conditions. With that in mind, Kryptonian researchers set out to fuse the strengths of their civilization with those of the Frieza core. By applying quantum computing to the core's energy conversion systems, they believed they could dramatically boost efficiency, curb wastage, and sharpen both the power and accuracy of Frieza weaponry. At the same time, the core's breakthroughs in biological transformation promised fresh insights for Kryptonian life science research, guiding the seamless integration of organic tissue and machinery, and ultimately producing biomechanical beings capable of thriving in the harshest reaches of space. Ethan observed the Kryptonians' eager embrace of the Frieza Force's information technology, but he paid it little mind. To them, it was simply the natural next step for a civilization that had, by sheer luck, discovered a life-bearing planet despite glaring gaps in its own scientific understanding. They would never suspect these breakthroughs came from another universe. Even after accepting the so-called interstellar emblem granted by Frieza's forces, they wouldn't dare plot a course with those coordinates. Star charts could be forged, and the galaxy hid far more black holes than early astronomers ever dreamed. A single navigational error meant certain doom. So if Krypton's navigators noticed any discrepancies between their own maps and those supplied by Frieza, they dismiss it as yet another of Frieza's deceptions, never imagining they were confronting superior, universe-spanning technology. Fiora, General Zod's most trusted adjutant, cut through the void of space like a blazing meteor. With unrivaled flying speed and razor-sharp instincts, she shattered the interstellar barrier at the decisive moment and hurtled toward the battlefield. Her arrival alone was enough to shift the tide of war. As she soared through drifting cosmic dust, the scene that unfolded before her was nothing short of cataclysmic. Planets cracked under the sheer force of impact, and distant nebulae writhed as if caught in the throes of some cosmic storm. At the heart of this chaos, General Zod and Frieza were locked in a ferocious duel, each blow sending shockwaves rippling outward, each collision glowing like a supernova. Zod knew better than anyone how perilous it was to face an opponent like Frieza. One misstep could cost him his life, so he chose a fighting style that skirted the edge of self-destruction. By simulating nuclear fusion within his body, he concentrated his energy to near infinite levels. Normally, this solar flare mode demands continuous energy release to prevent catastrophic overheating. But Zod did the unthinkable. He sealed every joule of power inside, using his biological force field as both vault and engine. In doing so, he transformed himself into a living furnace, dangerous to friend and foe alike, yet unstoppable on the battlefield. Though this combat technique lets him unleash tremendous power for a short burst, it places a massive strain on his body, and a single misstep could cause him to self-destruct. Frieza, as overlord of the universe, faces no such limitations. His energy reserves are nearly infinite, and he attacks with reckless abandon, hurling planet-shattering waves of power as though entire worlds were nothing more than specks of dust in his path. Yet even Frieza couldn't shake a creeping unease. He detected Fiora's arrival and couldn't help but wonder, had his forces begun to falter? At once, both he and his troops paused. There was no need for words between Fiora and General Zod. Their silent understanding was enough. A single glance, a subtle nod, and the message was clear. Fiora's presence alone buoyed Zod's spirits. Her very ability to reach this battlefield proved that the Kryptonian army had effectively quashed, or perhaps even annihilated, Frieza's resistance. The report hit General Zod like a surge of adrenaline, instantly chasing away most of his doubts. Frieza, however, remained uneasy. He still sensed that something was amiss. Their communications array lay in ruins, cutting him off from any reinforcements. Worse still, the steely resolve on Fiora's and Zod's faces told him they had no intention of letting him slip away. Without a word, Fiora's form erupted in the same golden-red solar flare aura that enveloped Zod. The two of them stood there, bathed in fierce, otherworldly light. Frieza's jaw clenched. "Here we go again," he growled, dread curling in his voice. "They're coming for us. Once more?" Chapter 833. Frieza's Defeat. Frieza was pushed to his absolute limits by the relentless onslaught of General Zod and Ethan. He could barely raise his defenses, protecting only his head, while leaving his lower body dangerously exposed. From the very first moment, the battle erupted like colliding stars, blinding flashes of light and thunderous booms reverberated across the void. The once feared overlord of the universe now looked desperate and disoriented. Zod and Ethan moved with flawless, almost telepathic coordination. Every strike was ruthlessly precise, as if computed by the most sophisticated supercomputer in existence. Perfect power, perfect speed, perfect angle. They struck like twin bolts of lightning across the battlefield, driving Frieza steadily back. His furious roars echoed through the cosmos, a testament to his rage at being outmatched by two mere mortals. Yet no amount of anger could change reality. Zod's Kryptonian prowess and Ethan's superhuman reflexes made escape impossible. With each passing second, Frieza's energy reserves drained further. Sparks flew from his battered armor as he desperately tried to fend off wave after wave of attacks. In a last-ditch effort, he unleashed a titanic blast of purple energy meant to obliterate his opponents. But Zod and Ethan met the assault head-on, deflecting it with combined force. In that critical moment, Frieza's defeat became inevitable. Coordinating their final strike, Zod and Ethan ripped through his defenses and hurled him to the scorched ground. The tyrant's body quivered in defeat, smoldering under the impact. He lay broken and powerless, incapable even of raising a defiant glare. The greatest threat the universe had ever known was at last vanquished. Silence fell across the battlefield, heavy and absolute. Zod and Ethan stood victorious amid the smoke and debris, their breathing ragged, but their expressions unwavering. Together, they had undone a menace that had terrorized countless worlds. Yet even in their triumph, an unsettling thought lingered. Frieza was defeated, but what other dangers waited in the vast reaches of space? And what new trials would this victory bring? The universe had been saved for now, but the war for its future was far from over. Ethan lashed out with successive energy blasts, but his strikes, once potent enough to shatter planets, faltered helplessly against the near-perfect defenses of General Zod and Fiora. Only Frieza's first form would ever have stood a chance against them before, but a century under Earth's yellow sun had transformed Superman into something godlike. Although Zod and his cadre hadn't quite reached the heights of the last son of Krypton, they'd evolved into true Super Kryptonians. Individually, they might still trail hail, the celebrated Super Kryptonian, but together, this new generation had no trouble repelling even Frieza's mightiest assaults. Watching them stand impervious to his best efforts, Ethan realized he was witnessing history in motion. He glimpsed their inevitable future. In 2 centuries, these Super Kryptonians would face a crossroads. One path led to transcending their physical forms entirely, becoming energy-based quantum life beings, much like the legendary Blue Superman. That transformation was born of the alien energy pulsing through their veins, energy that, when driven beyond its limits, could no longer be contained in flesh and bone. The arrival of Terra's cosmic power only accelerated the process, ensuring that Zod and his followers would one day surrender their humanity and ascend into a new state of being. As Ethan steadied himself for the battle ahead, he understood that this confrontation was not just a clash of strength, but the catalyst for the next evolutionary leap of an entire race. Ethan studied the holographic projection before him, tracing the outlines of countless evolutionary paths. One route, he said, is cellular nuclear fusion, cells evolving step by step until each becomes a miniature star, a tiny fusion reactor. Whichever path life follows, the potential is limitless. Barely a moment later, Frieza, who had dramatically underestimated Kryptonian power, fell under Ethan's assault. The alien warlord screamed in fury and disbelief. "Damn it, is this really where I die?" Desperation and rage surged through him. Memories of entire worlds he'd razed and civilizations cowering at his command flashed through his mind, images that now felt like a cruel prelude to his own extinction. Then, driven half-mad by the certainty of defeat, Frieza made a terrifying choice. If he couldn't win, he would ensure nobody else lived to see victory. Gathering every last ounce of energy, he began constructing a cataclysmic device, an explosive bomb, potent enough to tear the planet apart. This was his final gambit, his ultimate act of lunacy. Frieza knew that once the bomb detonated, Earth would be annihilated, and he, General Zod, and Fiora would all be consumed in the ensuing inferno. Then let us perish together in annihilation. Frieza's declaration reverberated through the void, each word dripping with a tragedy born of cold resolve. He raised his arms deliberately, dark purple energy crackling across his gauntleted palms like a rising tide. The streams of power swirled inward, coalescing into a blinding orb of light and malice. This sphere was more than a weapon. It was the physical manifestation of Frieza's despair and wrath, pulsing with such raw, destructive force that reality itself seemed to shudder. General Zod and Fiora, renowned warriors of Krypton, stood before him, hearts pounding at the threat unfolding. Their supercharged intellects raced, analyzing the energy signature in an instant. The verdict was chilling. This was a planet-destroying warhead, and Frieza had made up his mind to go out in a cataclysmic blaze. "We have to stop him," Zod hissed, his armor creaking as he squared his shoulders. Fiora met his gaze, steel in her eyes. No words were needed. They'd reached the same conclusion. Side by side, the two Kryptonian generals readied themselves to confront the tyrant, determined to save countless lives by any means necessary. Ethan and Fiora sprang forward at breakneck speed, twin streaks of lightning cleaving through the night sky as they aimed straight for Frieza. But Frieza was ready. A cruel sneer crossed his face as the glowing orb in his palm flared brilliantly, an unmistakable warning that the device was about to detonate. "You're too late," he hissed. With a single merciless motion, Frieza triggered the bomb. A colossal shockwave of destructive energy rippled outward, hurling Ethan and Fiora backward. The force was so immense it seemed to shake the very stars, warping the fabric of space and time around them. Yet Frieza's frenzy was far from over. In the same instant, he flung a second planetary bomb from his other hand. It cut through the sky like the scythe of death itself, hurtling toward Earth. As it descended, the weapon expanded rapidly, its bulk soon blotting out nearly half the horizon. Below, Earth's reluctant defenders watched in horror as panic swept through the ranks of Kryptonians. Still, despite the looming cataclysm, they refused to yield. "Oh no, the enemy has activated a planet-destroying weapon." In an instant, the Kryptonians sprang into action. The scientific corps, moving at superhuman speed and protected by shimmering bioforce fields, rushed to secure every valuable artifact and evacuate it to safety. Above them, the military wing shot into the sky, unleashing their thermal vision in an attempt to neutralize the bomb's tremendous energy output. "Frieza!" At that cry, General Zod's roar split the atmosphere. He would not stand by while his people faced annihilation, nor tolerate any foe who dared threaten them, even at the cost of his own life. Drawing in a deep breath, he focused every ounce of his strength into his right fist. Flames of golden-red energy coalesced around it, burning so fiercely they illuminated the void beyond the planet. Boom! The impact reverberated across the cosmos. When Zod's charged fist struck Frieza, it was as if the stars the core themselves had been shaken. Flesh and blood spattered in all directions as the searing million-degree heat, rivaling the core of a dying sun, instantly began vaporizing Frieza's body with sharp, hissing cracks. Puff! Dark waves of blood surged up Frieza's throat, choking off his defiance. Ethan's eyes went wide with disbelief. He had never imagined that he, the Emperor of the Universe, could be bested by an alien. Yet here it was, undeniable, the cold truth standing before him, reducing all his ambition and power to something pale and powerless. Chapter 834, Packing Up Frieza's Army. Ethan's fist blazed with temperatures rivaling the sun's core. All at once, that unimaginable heat struck Frieza's chest, vaporizing him in an instant. The tyrant's skin liquefied, his muscles carbonized, then scattered into motes of light, accompanied by a final, anguished wail that was swallowed by the void. When Frieza's scream died away, Ethan exhaled in relief and let the solar flare mode cool. His armor, once flawless, was now warped and curled at the edges from the inferno he'd unleashed. Every breath stabbed him with pain as burned cells gave way to necrosis. He staggered. Fiora was at his side in a heartbeat. Placing her hands on his shoulders, she channeled a gentle, chai-infused current through his body. Blackened flesh began to mend, and though the restoration would be gradual, the worst of the agony eased. "Thank you," Ethan rasped, voice raw. He braced himself against a fallen support beam, trying to stand straighter. "We don't have much time," Fiora said, her grip firm. Ethan scanned the battlefield. Frieza's once formidable army stood leaderless and dazed among the scorched craters. Warships drifted overhead, their docking clamps cold and idle. "Lieutenant Rao," he called. A young officer snapped to attention beside him. "Secure every surviving vessel," Ethan ordered. "No one boards without permission." Rao saluted and sprinted away, barking orders to his squad. Turning back to the prisoners, Ethan gave his next command. "Bind any who resist. We move them to the Hammerhead for processing and full interrogation. We need everything on record." Fiora steadied him again. "You're still weak." Ethan managed a grim smile. "A little, but Frieza's dead. Now we clear out his leftovers." Below them, squad leaders were already rounding up the fallen troopers, herding them into makeshift pens. Dock crews on the landing pads loaded confiscated energy weapons and supply crates onto transport shuttles. The planet, once silent, hummed with activity as the cleanup began. He watched the operation, every cell in his body humming with triumph. Once the last loyalist was secured, the fleet would set course for the Citadel, where the true Galactic Council awaited their victory report. "Onward," he whispered, lifting his chin. Behind him, Fiora fell into step, ready to shoulder the next phase of their mission, dismantling Frieza's empire, piece by broken piece. Ethan stood over the console, eyes locked on the biometric readouts. When General Zod's vital signs finally registered green, relief washed over him, and he wasted no time. He activated the emergency evacuation protocol. Shifting into solar flare mode had granted them unprecedented power, but it also strained every system aboard the ship. One miscalculation now could rip them apart. Strapping on his flight harness, Ethan carefully lifted the wounded general onto his back and launched into space. He darted between drifting asteroids and fractured starship wreckage, the glow of charged particles illuminating his path. Only moments before, Frieza's planetary bombardment had laid waste to nearby worlds. Dozens of veteran Kryptonians, each centuries old and honed by countless battles, had thrown themselves in front of those blasts, their super-dense bodies absorbing the energy waves with barely a stagger. Back in the research vessel's medical bay, the lab division moved with practiced urgency. Technicians eased Zod onto an anti-grav biobed, then swarmed him with scanners, injectors, and rebreathers. Holographic charts flickered to life, data streams cascading across transparent displays. Indicator lights, red, amber, green, blinked in tense rhythm. Every meter told the same grim story. General Zod's cells were critically damaged, membranes ruptured, metabolic functions waning, energy channels on the verge of collapse. Ethan burst through the saloon doors, still catching his breath. "Report," he demanded. A senior medic swiveled in her chair, fingers flying over a touchpad. "Cellular integrity is below survival threshold. We can't stabilize him without a full system regenerative infusion, and that takes time we may not have." Ethan clenched his fists. Time was the one thing they didn't have. Drawing a deep breath, he moved to Zod's side. "Do whatever it takes," he ordered. "If that man dies, so do we all." Chief Scientist Ethan, a Kryptonian prodigy famed for his extraordinary intellect, worked swiftly to assess General Zod's condition. He discovered that although massive cell necrosis had set in, it was not beyond repair. The real challenge, Ethan explained, lay in finding a way to rebuild those damaged cells quickly and effectively without allowing the surplus energy coursing through Zod's body to destabilize the process. Hope, it turned out, was not lost. Only weeks earlier, the Kryptonian High Council had completed the reverse engineering of several Frieza Force technologies, and among them was the treatment pod. Thanks to the Frieza Core's breakthroughs, Ethan announced, "We finally have the tool we need to save him." Before this acquisition, their only recourse would have been to place Zod in suspended animation under yellow sun radiation, locking him inside a standard yellow sun treatment chamber. Recovery under that system could drag on for a year or even longer, while his cells healed at a painfully slow rate. Now, however, with access to the Frieza Corp Advanced Treatment Pod, the very same device that empowered the Dragon Ball fighters to stage their early comebacks, they could accelerate the repair process, actively manage his energy levels, and bring Zod back from the brink in a fraction of the time. Ethan gave the order. Within moments, the gleaming treatment pod hissed open, its interior bathed in a soft, violet glow. As technicians carefully eased General Zod's inert form inside, Ethan monitored the readouts. If their calculations were correct, Zod would emerge from stasis not only healed, but stronger and more stable than before, ready to resume his duties in defense of Krypton. Even if it wasn't as miraculous as a Senzu bean, at least it could be mass-produced and widely distributed. The research-oriented Kryptonians, blessed with superbrains, had assimilated the Frieza Corps' technology at speeds no conventional computer could match. They didn't merely duplicate the healing pod's core mechanics, they boldly innovated, reshaping the design to fit Kryptonian physiology and dramatically boosting its efficiency. After all, if Superman could absorb the knowledge of 52 galactic civilizations in an instant, these scientific prodigies had even less to struggle with. General Zod was carefully settled inside the spherical chamber of the upgraded pod. As soon as the hatch sealed, a specialized biofluid began to fill the interior, swirling around him like a warm, living ocean. Tiny service drones hovered in the mist, their manipulators poised to mend torn tissue and fractured bones. The fluid itself was laced with advanced biochemical catalysts, engineered to penetrate to the cellular level and accelerate regeneration. Quiet whirs and soft clicks echoed as the drones set to work, their precision tools probing Zod's wounds. Each automated movement was honed for efficiency, ensuring that damaged cells would patch together seamlessly. Bathed in the healing solution, General Zod lay motionless, cradled by technology that promised to restore him far more quickly than any ordinary medical treatment. Ethan watched the last of the nanite swarms finish their work inside the scanning chamber, then turned away from the console. Around him, sleek diagnostic arms and bioregeneration units hummed, methodically repairing every torn muscle fiber and shattered bone in General Zod's body. Within hours, Zod's pallid skin flushed back to its customary alabaster hue. His chest rose and fell in measured, powerful breaths. Beside Zod's bed, Fiora and the remaining survivors underwent the same rapid treatments. Ethan refused to let them linger unprotected. Any delay might expose them to an incoming patrol of Earth warriors. Time was a luxury they didn't have. A soft chime announced the completion of Zod's final scan. Ethan keyed in a command, and a containment field sealed around a simple crystalline pod. Inside, tiny motes of swirling energy coalesced, Frieza's preserved particles. Not dead yet, Ethan murmured to himself. He had harvested every fragment of Frieza's essence moments after their encounter, ready to reassemble the tyrant at will. For good measure, he'd packed the rest of Frieza's army the same way. Particle reconstitution was child's play to him, akin to snapping together building blocks. Once Frieza was back in coherent form, Ethan planned to unleash him on DC and Marvel territories. It felt like a squandered opportunity. Frieza's brutality could have been directed more strategically, but it would sow enough chaos to keep other interstellar powers occupied. Stepping out of the medical wing, Ethan made his way to the Grand Observation Chamber, where a dozen Kryptonian officers, led by a veteran whose service dated back nearly a century, stood at attention. "You've all done exemplary work," Ethan said, voice calm and assured. Between the triage crews and the repair protocols, the entire cleanup was flawless. The aged commander straightened, hand snapping to his forehead in a crisp salute. "Sir Inspector." The rest echoed his greeting, respect shining in their eyes. Ethan inclined his head. "You may stand down. We move to Phase 2 at dawn." As the Kryptonians relaxed into casual stances, Ethan allowed himself a brief smile. The battlefield was tidied. General Zod would rise again, and somewhere out there, Frieza's rebirth was already in motion. The galaxy was about to learn that Ethan's oversight left no loose ends. "All right, let's go. I'll send you back." Ethan waved his hand. In an instant, the universe seemed to flip upside down, and the Kryptonians found themselves bathed once more in the warm, potent light of the Terra galaxy. This was their natural habitat, a realm where any injury vanished with every breath, restoring both blood and mana. Ethan offered no further rewards. They already possessed the advanced technology of Frieza's army. What more could they want? Their next target would undoubtedly be Marvel's Earth, if only as a grand spectacle. And when outsiders questioned why so many worlds shared the same name in history, Ethan had a ready answer. The universe was vast, with hundreds of millions of star systems in the Milky Way alone. Coincidences were inevitable. Besides, no sign of Kal-El appeared on this Earth, silencing any skeptics. As for compensation, the Kryptonians felt none was due. They had struck a clear bargain with the Galaxy Supervisor. In return for scouting habitable planets and helping to settle new colonies, they would serve as the galaxy's custodians, its cleaners. And that was reward enough. Ethan glanced at the holoscreen briefing one more time, then nodded to himself. The Galaxy Supervisor had made it clear. He was far too busy to clean up Zod's mess in person. This trash, as the Supervisor disdainfully called them, was Ethan's problem now. With General Zod and his elite force neutralized, no young Kryptonian would dare dream of rebellion or petition for rewards. The Supervisor's terror ran so deep that even whispers of dissent died on Krypton's wind before they formed. When Zod finally tumbled out of the medical stasis pod, disoriented and weak, he expected to find himself drifting in space for months, maybe a year, before anyone noticed. Instead, the artificial sky of the Terra Galaxy hovered just beyond the hangar doors. "It's only been a day?" he rasped, stumbling into the stark corridor. Ethan stepped forward, holstered phasers clicking at his hips. "Your recovery was efficient," he said evenly. "Welcome back to Terra." Zod's cold pride flickered into shock. He had braced for years of convalescence. A single day, it seemed, was enough for the Galaxy Supervisor, and for Ethan, to tie up every loose end. Chapter 835, Post-War Review. The Devil's in the Details. General Zod stood before the command ship's viewplate, his eyes fixed on the smoldering battlefield fading into the distance. This clash with Frieza's forces had not only tested Krypton's military might, but had pushed their strategic acumen and unit cohesion to the breaking point. Though Zod had ordered exhaustive preparations, confronting such a fearsome, unknown enemy had left him, and surely his officers, restless and uneasy. After all, even he, the Supreme Commander, had been gravely wounded and forced into a healing stasis. If he could fall so hard, what hope remained for the troops? "Sir, the casualty report is ready," announced the adjutant in silver regalia, stepping forward with a barely concealed sense of relief. Zod turned, his gaze narrowing as he scanned the figures in the report. Inwardly, he offered a silent prayer that the losses would be lighter than he feared. "Report," General Zod said, his voice cool and clipped. "As you know, sir," the adjutant began, "our troops were all century-old veterans chosen by rigorous selection. They're equipped with the latest black combat armor, complete with built-in biofield enhancers and advanced defensive systems. Those systems performed exceptionally, absorbing or deflecting most of the fatal blows. As a result, not a single one of our super Kryptonian soldiers has been lost." A hint of pride colored his words, both a tribute to the men's skill and to Krypton's technological superiority. Zod's rigid features softened for a moment, the corners of his mouth lifting ever so slightly. Then the tension returned. "What about injuries?" he asked. "They're concentrated in a few critical areas," the adjutant replied. "Most of the wounds came from directly resisting the planetary bombardment device. Fortunately, our medical team was on scene immediately. Using the state-of-the-art treatment bays, they've already stabilized every life sign and begun full recovery protocols." Zod nodded once, sharply, satisfied, for now, that his army would live to fight another day. "According to the initial assessment, their injuries will take time to heal, but there's no threat to their lives." The adjutant finished his report and handed General Zod a comprehensive list of the wounded, alongside recommended treatment plans. Zod accepted the documents and examined each entry with a keen eye. "Excellent. Since the evolutionary changes began, Kryptonians have grown ever more resilient. Our civilization will only grow stronger, beyond anything we've known before." "Very well," Zod ordered. "Deploy our finest medical teams immediately. I want every casualty given the best possible care." Once the directive was issued, Zod turned to the next agenda, the post-battle review. He knew that extracting lessons from every conflict was essential to strengthening the Kryptonian people. The war room's vast holographic screen flickered to life, replaying footage recorded by the multiple camera arrays embedded in their armor. Frame by frame, it detailed the Frieza Corps' fighting styles, tactical formations, and the distinctive capabilities of their weapons and equipment. General Zod and a cadre of Kryptonian researchers were gathered before the display, scrutinizing every frame. Notice how, despite the wide variance in individual strength among the Frieza Corps soldiers, their coordination is exceptionally effective, Zod observed. One researcher tapped the screen, highlighting a cluster of battle footage. However, their teamwork seems to rely on a strict command hierarchy rather than genuine rapport or trust. Precisely, another researcher agreed. While that system delivers impressive results, it's inherently fragile. Should the command network be disrupted or destroyed, the entire Legion's combat effectiveness would collapse. In contrast, our own unity, rooted in shared experience and mutual understanding, is far more resilient against external interference. As their discussion deepened, Krypton's artificial intelligence sprang into action. Why? Within moments, it had fused the incoming data from every battle suit into a fully realized virtual battlefield, ready to test strategies or anticipate enemy maneuvers with unparalleled fidelity. Ethan stood among a ring of white-coated scientists and officers as the holographic battlefield sprang to life before them. General Zod's voice echoed through the chamber. This simulation lets us slip between engagements at will, inspect every unit in Frieza's army, even test alternate tactical responses in real time. Around them, the projection shifted seamlessly from desert plains to asteroid fields, each theater laid out in precise detail. A young Kryptonian scientist's eyes shone with excitement. "Commander, we've identified hundreds of previously unknown alien races, all serving under Frieza's flag." She tapped at her datapad, bringing up a scrolling list of species names, each accompanied by skeletal diagrams and cultural annotations. The physiological differences alone are staggering. It's clear these troops originate from at least 100 distinct civilizations. She pointed to clusters of colored markers on the holomap. On paper, such diversity should make an unbeatable force. Instead, it's like watching loose grains of sand. Their units lack cohesion, no shared tactics or training. Every platoon fights in its own way, and when they're pressed, confusion spreads like wildfire. Around the display, the other scientists leaned forward, heads swiveling as they compared alien anatomies and battle doctrines. Some murmured in Kryptonian, debating whether cultural barriers or incompatible physiology might be the true cause of Frieza's erratic battle performance. Ethan watched them closely. In all his years of study and countless battle simulations, he had never seen such a rich, tangled web of species under one banner. This chaotic mosaic, he realized, might be Frieza's greatest weakness. Although Frieza's army boasted staggering numbers, its soldiers fought as isolated units, with no unified tactics or central command structure. That fatal weakness severely undermined their overall combat effectiveness. What's more, the individual power levels among Frieza's troops varied wildly. Some warriors could go toe-to-toe with our elite fighters, while others hadn't even mastered basic battle techniques. This disparity isn't just a battlefield liability, a young researcher observed, leaning over the data displays with excitement. It also represents a massive misallocation of resources and talent. Exactly, added another Kryptonian scientist. What our readings make clear is that Frieza himself towers above every other member of his corps. His personal might props up the entire force. In other words, the whole army depends almost entirely on one individual, Frieza. Should he be defeated or otherwise incapacitated, the entire Legion would crumble. General Zod absorbed the analyst's conclusions in silence. Piece by piece, the true nature of Frieza's fractured army took shape in his mind. Ethan sat quietly in the war room, poring over the latest intelligence files. On paper, the Frieza force was terrifyingly powerful, devastating firepower, rapid deployment, and near-legendary combat units. Yet as he studied the organization charts and battlefield reports, one thing became painfully clear. The entire Legion was riven with fatal structural flaws. This fractured command structure, Ethan murmured to himself, might very well be Frieza's own design. his way of safeguarding absolute control. A veteran researcher beside him nodded in agreement. Exactly. Frieza cements his authority by tightly controlling every resource, troop deployments, weapons allocations, even basic provisions. And any officer who shows the slightest independence, he's removed before he ever becomes a threat. The foot soldiers, the elites, none of them are anything more than cogs in his personal war machine. At Ethan's signal, a team of Kryptonian scientists sprang into action. They began running a meticulous series of analyses on the alien life forms recently captured from the Frieza Force's advance. Each specimen was cataloged, studied for weaknesses, and cross-referenced against known xenobiological databases. Their goal was clear: exploit the invaders' hidden vulnerabilities before Frieza even realized they existed. Chapter 836, Battle. Ethan watched with keen interest as the Kleptometrics unit logged every distinguishing feature of each life form, their anatomy, cultural customs, technological sophistication, even the nuances of their social hierarchies. All these details were being meticulously compiled into the Kryptonian database, an ever-growing archive that would not only deepen Krypton's grasp of the galaxy's myriad civilizations, but also guide its future expeditions and diplomatic overtures. It was Ethan's intervention that had shifted Kryptonian policy from unrestrained conquest to cautious engagement. No longer content to steamroll lesser races, the High Council recognized that the age of blind invasion was over, especially if the Galactic Supervisor disapproved. Instead, they now place supreme value on intelligence gathering and cultural exchange. So it hardly surprised Ethan when, in the dim glow of the war room, General Zod and his senior officers pored over encrypted dossiers on the Frieza Force. Though unexpected, after all, the Frieza Corps were notorious for their brutal tyranny, it made perfect sense. Any civilization intent on expanding its reach needed to understand potential adversaries as thoroughly as possible. And from where Ethan stood, this commitment to thorough reconnaissance spoke volumes about Krypton's ambitions and its evolving code of honor. Ethan watched with satisfaction as Kryptonian recovery teams finished securing the remains of the fallen Frieza Force. In state-of-the-art laboratories, scientists cataloged every specimen, dissecting their biology and uploading the data into a comprehensive database. Thanks to the hyper-advanced processing power of their collective minds, Kryptonians would never again face an unknown enemy. From now on, they would identify any intruder's weakness the moment they encountered them, and eliminate the threat in a single, decisive strike. With his mission complete, Ethan returned triumphantly to the Galactic Empire, accompanied by an astonishing array of newly created Kryptonian hybrids. Each one was a perfect particle-by-particle replica of a superpowered Kryptonian, among them legendary figures like General Zod and the fierce warrior Fiora. And to safeguard their most precious genetic heritage, Ethan had implemented an unbreakable quantum lock on all Kryptonian DNA sequences. The moment any sample left an approved containment field, a failsafe would trigger particle annihilation and immediate data erasure. No one could steal or misuse Kryptonian genes again. Through technology and foresight, Ethan had finally solved the problem of genetic leakage once and for all. Ethan's departure did nothing to slow the Empire's rise. It only spurred it on. In the years since he walked away, the Galactic Empire has woven together an unstoppable coalition. Thousands of superpowered Kryptonians fused with Boros's one-eyed alien warriors, the golden humans of Saitama, and the monstrous species plucked straight from the One Punch Man world. This new race of champions stands head and shoulders above any force in the Milky Way. No civilization in Marvel's cosmic expanse could match them. Individual prowess simply isn't their universe's strong suit. Where a handful of heroes might rule planets, they would have been nothing more than local warlords before the Empire's legions. Even the Kree, once under Skrull dominion, seized similar bioengineering breakthroughs, transforming ordinary soldiers into super soldiers, and used that very power to throw off their creators. Yet those feats pale beside the Empire's monstrous foot soldiers, each capable of toppling Earth's greatest champions with terrifying ease. Science, culture, and military strength have all surged forward at a breath-stopping pace. Where once rival empires held entire sectors of the galaxy in check, Now they cower in fear at the mere whisper of the Galactic Empire's arrival. Under this relentless expansion, every star system, every outlying colony, and every hidden kingdom has one truth burned into its heart. The Empire is invincible, and its dominion is absolute. The Galactic Empire's power rested not only on its vast military might, but also on its open, inclusive civilization and its unending drive to explore and conquer the unknown. Yet as its borders stretched ever outward, clashes with neighboring powers became inevitable. Now, the venerable Shi'ar Empire, an old rival of equal strength, has emerged as a new threat. With its sprawling territories and formidable forces, the Shi'ar stand ready to challenge the Empire's dominance. Fortunately, the Empire has its guardian, Number 18. When General Dojian personally led an elite Shi'ar strike force to provoke the Empire's frontier, Number 18 met them alone. In a swift, decisive confrontation, he shattered their assault, drove Dojian's troops into retreat, and reaffirmed the unassailable majesty of the Galactic Empire. News of the skirmish reached Ethan's ears, and his curiosity was instantly piqued. Drawing on his mastery of chronal quantum mechanics, he set out to uncover the deeper forces at play. Surrounding himself with a luminous network of intricate algorithms, he watched as each glowing filament traced the subtlest fluctuation in the timeline, tiny ripples that might reveal the true stakes behind this looming interstellar conflict. Ethan's vision wove every fragment of history into a single, seamless tapestry. His eyes pierced through layers of obscurity, as though they could cut through fog and reveal the universe's best-kept secrets. With his quantum information sight, time and space lost all meaning. Past, present, and future collided and intertwined in full clarity. Not even the covert maneuvers of the Time Administration or the schemes of Conqueror Kang could evade his scrutiny. Though they had pulled every string behind the scenes, all their machinations lay exposed before him. Yet Ethan felt no urge to chase them down. Their influence was now negligible, and he had no use for what could not further his purpose. He refocused on the pivotal moment itself, on Dojian, the last guardian of the Shi'ar Empire, whose very existence was the stuff of legend. Under the glaring sun, Dojian's violet skin shone with a faint metallic luster. His flowing battle robe, stitched in red and blue, marked him both as imperial champion and as the living font of his formidable power. In that instant, every choice, every conflict, and every hidden alliance revealed itself to Ethan, setting the stage for what would come next. Ethan's cloak billowed across the battlefield like living flame, each sweep of his blade accompanied by the crack of wind and thunder. His unblinking gaze, as if it pierced straight through armor and steel, sent ripples of fear through the ranks before a single sword met flesh. He paused at the heart of the fray, chest rising and falling with controlled power, and spoke in a voice that rumbled like distant storm clouds. "I am Ethan, captain of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard." Every syllable rolled off his tongue with unquestionable authority, carrying equal parts disdain for his foes and complete faith in his own strength. In Ethan's eyes, this clash was no more than another chance to demonstrate the Shi'ar Empire's inviolable might, an opportunity he would single-handedly seize. "Today," he announced, "I will stand against the entire Galactic Empire by my own hand." There was no hollow pride in his words, only the steady assurance of a warrior who had never known defeat. To the proud champions of the Galactic Empire, such a declaration sounded outrageously bold. Yet, when their blades finally met Ethan's, they discovered the terrible power that lay behind his unshakable confidence. Ethan's power is unmatched anywhere in the universe. Countless battles have proven it. He wields strength so vast he can lift entire mountain ranges with ease and rattle distant stars with a single strike. His speed surpasses even light itself. In an instant, he can cross interstellar distances, never giving his enemies so much as a chance to breathe. And when it comes to endurance, there is no equal. Even under our relentless assault and the cruelest tortures, Ethan remains steadfast, refusing to yield or surrender. Chapter 837, Sword Fight. A towering figure stood at the center of the battlefield. He possessed microscopic vision that pierced the secrets of the tiniest worlds, thermal sight that unleashed searing rays hot enough to melt steel, and cryo breath so frigid it froze everything it touched in an instant. Together, these powers made Dujian one of the most terrifying beings in the universe. Among the assembled warriors was Ethan. Sword in hand, he fixed his gaze on the imposing envoy of the Shi'ar Empire, determination blazing in his eyes. With a hiss of metal, Dujian drew his blade. The sound of steel against steel rolled across the field like distant thunder, slicing through the chaos and settling in every heart. "You have all proven yourselves exceptional warriors," Dujian declared, his voice resonating like a hammer strike. "You've earned the chance to prove your worth. I, Dujian, envoy of the Shi'ar Empire, will accept your challenge personally. My forces will stand down. This battle is yours alone. Whether you fight singly or in concert, by any means you choose, if you defeat me here and now, the Shi'ar Empire will withdraw from this sector unconditionally." At his final word, the entire battlefield seemed to hold its breath. The war cries, the clash of blades, even the wind itself stilled, as if someone had pressed pause on reality. The warriors of the Galactic Empire exchanged stunned, bewildered glances. They'd never encountered an opponent so brimming with confidence, bordering on outright arrogance, and they certainly didn't expect the Shi'ar Empire to cede such a critical outpost without putting up a fight. Without warning, a hulking, blue-skinned warrior, representing the famed Hulk clan, thundered forward. Each of his colossal steps sent ripples across the battlefield. Among the Empire's legions, the Hulks were universally acknowledged as its premier shock troops. Only the Golden Humans, the Artificials, and a solitary clan of one-eyed aliens could rival their raw power. Even the Empire's renowned swordmaster regarded the charging giant with a wary side-eye, finally understanding why this formidable figure had personally taken the field. He must be the Shi'ar general, stepping forward to deter lesser challengers. The instant the Blue Hulk's massive fist descended, it seemed to freeze the very air, as though reality itself braced for impact. Yet Ethan moved with preternatural speed. In the fraction of a heartbeat before the blow landed, he pivoted, slipped under the arc of that crushing fist, and delivered a precise counterstrike to the general's knee. The sound of shattering armor echoed as steel buckled beneath his blow, and in that split second of surprise, the tide of battle teetered on the brink of a whole new war. With a single motion, Dujian caught the thunderous blow that could have toppled a mountain. In that instant, the very air ignited with a deafening roar. A shockwave tore through the battlefield like a hurricane, sucking up metal fragments and dust into a churning tempest that blotted out the sky. Yet through the chaos, Dujian's figure remained perfectly still. His feet were rooted to the ground as though fused with the earth itself. No gale, no tremor could unseat him. In almost artistic precision, he deflected every punch from Blue Hulk, flowing effortlessly between offense and defense. Each move was exact, a testament to his supreme command of power. "Impressive," Dujian remarked softly over the roar of battle. "Such strength places you among the elite of the Shi'ar Empire. But raw power alone does not make a warrior. True mastery lies in knowing when and how to wield it." He held Blue Hulk's gaze, his expression composed. Strength is the foundation of any fighter, but it is far from everything. And with that, the clash continued. Ethan's voice rang out above the chaos of battle, clear, commanding, and impossible to ignore. "True strength," he declared, "lies in mastering power and bending it to your will, rather than letting it consume you." With no further warning, he charged his Suishu, oared with a focused force. In a heartbeat, he unleashed a flawless straight punch that struck the hulking blue warrior squarely in the chest. It was more than raw strength. Each fiber of the blow reflected Ethan's precise control over his energy. The impact shattered bone and armor with a thunderous crack, propelling the Blue Hulk backward like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The giant flew across the battlefield and plowed into the hull of a nearby spacecraft. His massive body pinned against the reinforced plating, he hung there, utterly immobilized. A stunned silence fell over every soldier, and even the ranks of the Galactic Empire, the first to deploy their fiercest champions, stood slack-jawed. None had ever witnessed an opponent so powerful, let alone one capable of felling a titan like the Blue Hulk in an instant. Yet Ethan remained perfectly composed. He lowered his blade, eyes sweeping across the battlefield as if casually scanning a crowd for his next adversary. Then, from the ranks of Empire soldiers, a lone figure rose, a battle-scarred man with a single steely eye. He straightened his back, clenched his fist, and met Ethan's gaze. The next duel was about to begin. Ethan stood his ground as the towering figure before him flexed its lone cyclopean eye. A cold light danced within that massive orb, and the creature's lips curled into a faint, confident grin. "Defeat a member of the Hulk clan," it intoned, its voice low and resonant, "and you'll earn your place in my quest for greater power." He recognized the race immediately. The One-Eyed Stars were among the Galactic Empire's most feared special species, renowned for prodigious energy reserves, devastating energy attacks, and near-immortal regenerative capabilities. Yet Ethan felt no tremor of dread. Instead, a half-smile tugged at his lips, anticipation sharpening his senses. "A half-energy life form, a one-eyed star?" he murmured. "Then you're exactly the kind of opponent worth testing myself against." In an instant, the alien's aura flared. Swirls of incandescent energy coalesced around its body as it activated meteor burst form, its signature upgrade. This level of output was typically curtailed by Galvatron's safety controls. Few beings could withstand a full meteor burst without disintegrating under the strain. But even at a mere 10% of its total reserves, the One-Eyed Star's power eclipsed anything Ethan had ever encountered. His breath caught in his throat. The radiating energy was already more potent than the legendary Blue Hulk's fiercest assault. A molten glow bathed the clearing, tendrils of power cracking the ground at their feet. This was no ordinary duel. It was a crucible, and Ethan knew that, once the first strike was exchanged, there would be no turning back. He braced himself, channeling every ounce of his own energy into a single determined thought. "I will not be bested." Ethan was no ordinary warrior. Gifted with supervision, he instantly adapted to the One-Eyed Star's burst of speed and shattered his foe in just a few crushing blows. When waves of golden-clad fighters and synthetic soldiers poured in as reinforcements, even the hardened men and women of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard were taken aback. Who knew the Galactic Empire could field such powerful combatants? Still, Ethan, with unwavering focus and relentless precision, sent every last one of them reeling. The shock was palpable among the Shi'ar troops. They had entered this conflict utterly convinced that their captain of the guard was not only the strongest champion of the Shi'ar Empire, but the premier warrior in the entire universe. Now they watched in stunned silence as their heroes faltered, overpowered time and again by enemies they had once dismissed. It was clear the Galactic Empire's reach and ferocity knew no bounds. No wonder they had brazenly encroached on Shi'ar space. They had the might to do so without hesitation. The turning point came with the arrival of Subject 18. Cloaked in a casual indifference, she stepped onto the field. Bored by the half-measures, F this skirmish. This was never meant to be her fight. Yet her mere presence sent a chill through every rank on both sides. For before Ethan had taken to the stars, he had bequeathed to the Galactic Empire its final weapon, a living weapon calling itself Black Sperm, now confined aboard the ominously nicknamed Black Star, and with Black Sperm's power at their disposal, the balance of the galaxy would soon shift once more. Every cycle, the Galactic Empire delivers a vast supply of protein to the Black Star. With that steady nourishment, the dark sperms simply carry on dividing, unchecked. Their numbers have already swelled to 1 trillion, and they continue to multiply at an astonishing pace. Confidence is power, and yet, out of sheer boredom, Number 18 decided to strike first. As an android, her combat abilities were beyond question. After all, even Cell in his lightning-perfect form had once obliterated an entire solar system, an act of devastation unheard of in the Marvel Universe. Number 18 didn't quite match that level, but she was still a star-shattering powerhouse. Ethan, freshly hailed as the greatest warrior of the Shi'ar Empire, one of the 3 mightiest empires in the cosmos, stood blinking at her sudden appearance. Though he bore no personal prejudice against women, the Shi'ar had long been ruled by queens, he had never before encountered a female fighter of such raw strength. No 18 tilted her head and smiled, her eyes glinting. "What's the matter? Not planning to fight?" Ethan straightened, his voice respectful but determined. "My apologies, ma'am." Without another word, he unleashed his opening blow. Like a bolt of lightning tearing through midnight, his fist raced toward her, powerful enough to shake any world even before he tapped into his full strength. Ethan eased his power back, intending only to gauge number 18's strength. Even so, the force coiled in his fist was enough to make the very stars tremble. In an instant, his blow rocketed forward toward her face with a space-rending momentum. No, 18 didn't flinch. With lightning reflexes, she lifted her hand at the last possible moment as if brushing away a stray leaf. That deceptively light touch deftly diverted Ethan's mountain-shattering punch, and her body remained perfectly still. But Ethan's speed only increased. He shifted his weight and launched another strike before she could recover, leaving her no time even to breathe. In less than the blink of an eye, the shadow of his fist was already streaking toward her chest. Again, no 18 seemed to slide between frames. She brought her forearm up just in time, meeting his blow head-on. Ethan's force hit her arm like a tidal wave, erupting in a shockwave of energy that shoved her backward. Seeing her stagger, Ethan felt a rush of exhilaration rather than disappointment. He had finally found a genuine rival. Without hesitation, he rolled through and delivered his second punch. Ethan didn't hold back this time. His fist seemed to become a miniature black hole, swallowing every shred of light and sound around it. The speed and power behind that punch dwarfed his first attempt, hurtling straight for number 18's chest with undeniable destructive force. But number 18 wasn't caught off guard. She'd anticipated the move. Rather than evading, she planted her feet and met Ethan's blow head-on. A steely determination ignited in her eyes as energy flared up her arms, coalescing around her right fist like a living flame. Bang! The instant their fists connected, an explosive storm of power tore through the void, as if two stars had collided. A blinding shaft of light and roaring fire erupted outward, illuminating the darkness and shattering every nearby meteorite. The once solid rocks crumbled to stardust, drifting away like fragile confetti, tragic and breathtaking all at once. The universe itself seemed to quake in that instant. Even distant stars flickered, their light dimming under the weight of Ethan's power. Across the void, Dujan's face drained of color. He had never before felt a force so devastating. Ethan's fist struck like a collision of mountains against the sea, a physical shockwave that tore Dujan from his footing and hurled him through space. Dujan flew like a kite with a snapped string, tracing a long, arcing path until he slammed into a colossal asteroid, 300 kilometers across. The impact shattered the rock in a spectacular rain of debris that scattered in every direction. Spinning with the blow, Dujan managed to right himself and brace for Ethan's next assault. But Ethan gave him no quarter. As Dujan steadied his stance, Ethan surged forward, intent on finishing the fight. Dujan, however, reacted in the same heartbeat. His eyes flared with thermal energy, unleashing a beam of blazing light that cut through the void like a plasma saber. The beam's heat was inaudibly fierce, its penetrative edge capable of slicing through the toughest armor. In that flash of searing brilliance, the battle, already beyond cosmic proportions, intensified once more. Ethan didn't flinch under number 18's sudden assault. As she prepared to unleash a wave of Qigong energy, he let his thermal vision laser beam strike her defense, and then, at the last possible moment, deliberately overloaded it. In an instant, the void around them exploded in a cascade of golden light, lighting up the darkness like a spectacular fireworks display. The blast's heat and shockwaves surged outward in a roaring tsunami, sweeping number 18 off her feet and throwing her off balance. Before she could recover, Ethan had already slipped behind her. He drew in a steady breath, gathering every ounce of his power into his right fist until it blazed like a miniature sun. Cracks of shimmering gold fractured the surface, sending thousands of arrow-bright rays toward the armored vest across her back. This, his universe-breaking fist, was the pure distillation of Ethan's unshakable self-confidence. Because in his world, the stronger the conviction, the more devastating the strike. Ethan unleashed his full power in a single punch, his fierce will to win, and his ultimate quest for strength concentrated into one devastating blow. The instant his fist connected, the universe held its breath before being torn apart by an even more massive explosion. Golden light and roaring flames fused into a blinding beam, shooting straight upward and rending the surrounding space asunder. Caught in that overwhelming force, Number 18 was swallowed by the radiance, as if she'd become a blazing meteor. She tore through the asteroid belt at faster-than-light speed, trailing a brilliant tail behind her. That fiery comet described a spectacular arc across the cosmos and then plummeted toward a distant world with unstoppable momentum. When she struck, the planet convulsed. An earth-shaking blast rocked its surface, sending plumes of smoke and debris skyward as though heralding the end of days. A vast crater, more than 100 miles wide, exploded into being, flinging rock and soil into chaotic spirals. Amid the swirling dust, Number 18 hovered a few feet above the crater's edge, brushing stray particles from her uniform. A faint, wry smile curved her lips. "Well," she drawled, "that was entertaining." The battlesuit he wore had been built by Ethan with his own hands. By locking in the atom's Krypton gold, it drew on the same principles that give a water droplet its form. Yet it achieved what, in physics, would be called an absolute rigid body. Chapter 839, Superno 18. The concept of an absolute rigid body goes far beyond the limits of conventional physics. It isn't merely a description of a material's toughness. It represents the ultimate ideal in structural stability and indestructibility. In essence, an absolute rigid body is an object that preserves its perfect form under every conceivable condition, impervious to any external force that might try to deform it. When Ethan first conceived this marvel, he ventured into the microscopic realm of subatomic particles and uncovered new laws of atomic interaction. He then harnessed these laws to lock every atom in his battlesuit into its most stable configuration. The result is an unprecedented network of binding forces, far stronger than any known chemical bond or physical attraction in nature. To the naked eye, the suit's surface appears to be sheathed in an invisible shield capable of repelling nearly every form of assault: cosmic rays, high-energy particle beams. Even the searing pressures and temperatures found on a star's surface cannot mar its integrity. This is why only Super Number 18 can wield the legendary Krypton Gold battlesuit. Under its impenetrable guard, no attack can crack, bend, or corrode him, and he stands alone at the pinnacle of indestructible combat. Ethan couldn't bear to see his partner exposed after her armor had been shattered in battle. Summoning every last reserve of power, he felt raw energy surge through his veins, warping the air around him. His scarlet cloak snapped behind him like a blazing standard at the head of an assault as he lunged forward. In the blink of an eye, he became a streak of crimson light, after images flickering in his wake, as though he'd punched a hole through space itself. He reappeared directly above his opponent, Number 18, every muscle coiled to deliver a single decisive blow. But Number 18 was ready. With reflexes that defied reason, her arm shot up, her fist rocketing toward Ethan's in a collision that rent the air apart with a deafening crack. The force slammed through Ethan's punch like a freight train, rattling his skull as though struck by a sledgehammer. His body spun backward, hurtling through the sky, stunned by the blow. Ethan tumbled through the air, twisting and turning until at last he wrenched his body into a precarious sort of balance. He raised a trembling hand to his mouth and felt the warm trickle of blood on his fingertips, a sharp, metallic taste he hadn't experienced in years of fighting. Rather than cowing him, the pain ignited his spirit. He drew in a steadying breath, fueling his anger and frustration into a surge of raw energy. Just as Ethan prepared to retaliate, android number 18 materialized before him like an avenging specter. Her right fist crackled with voracious power as she launched a swift, bone-shattering uppercut. The blow struck Ethan's chin with the force of a battering ram, propelling him skyward in a single brutal arc. He shot hundreds of meters into the air, cutting through the clouds like a meteor hurled by destiny. That instantaneous impact taxed not only his physical strength, but also his ironclad will, pushing him to the very edge of his endurance. Ethan felt a white-hot pain flare across his chin, as if his face were on fire. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself to steady his racing heartbeat. "I can't lose," he told himself. He threw his arms wide, as though ripping through the very fabric of space. Translucent rings of air pulsed into being around him, evidence of his uncanny command over cosmic energy. Each shimmering halo wove together to stabilize his posture, even as it magnified his speed and strength. In one fluid motion, Ethan spun skyward, his body arcing like a warrior god descending. He drove his right leg forward, brimming with destructive force, and unleashed a soaring kick at number 18 below. Golden light flared along his limb, igniting into a radiant beam that cleaved the night air, zeroing in on its mark. Confidence swelled within him, backing him to the very summit of his power. With this blow, he could pulverize an entire planet, reduce it to stardust. No 18 frowned. No 18 could no longer withstand that planet-shaking blow by ordinary means. She drew in a steadying breath, and deep within her, the dormant cyan blood began to boil. A raw, unprecedented power surged through her veins. This was the result of Ethan's genetic work, splicing cyan DNA into her cells to create a true hybrid warrior. Through relentless training and by following the Super Saiyan evolution pathway Ethan devised, she had mastered the transformation completely. Her strength already eclipsed that of a standard Super Saiyan, and then some. "Ha!" she snarled, low and fierce. In an instant, her whole body convulsed with an earth-rending force. Her short hair shot up into rigid, metallic steel spikes of gold, while her irises flared a deep, untamed green. That verdant light in her eyes spoke of a primal ferocity and a burning will to fight. She inhaled again, and the maelstrom of energy inside her pressed outward, shattering the limits of flesh and resonating with the world around her. A radiant aura of golden flame roiled at her back, propelling her speed and strength to unheard-of heights, and filling her with a breathtaking sense of freedom and invincibility. The golden pillar of flame and the sword's column of light shot skyward as two distinct, brilliant forces, each magnificent in its own right, rose to meet one another. They twisted and collided high above the planet, igniting the very air with raw power and setting off a meteorological spectacle the world had never seen. Mountains trembled, rivers rippled, and even the ground itself shuddered, as if the planet were bearing witness to this climactic struggle. Ethan stood his ground, feet planted firmly apart. He curled his fists, bent his knees, and flexed every muscle, bracing for the impact. Across the sky, Dujian launched a flying kick suffused with golden radiance, streaking through the dark like a meteor on a collision course. Then, in an instant, the two energies crashed, a deafening roar shattered the stillness, and a blinding flash rent the heavens. The shockwave radiated outward, ripping dust and boulders from the surface and hurling them into a churning, chaotic storm. The planet itself seemed to wail under the onslaught, its crust quaking as if begging for mercy. As the light subsided and the dust began to settle, only two silhouettes remained at the heart of the devastation, Ethan and Dujian, locked in a battle that had shaken worlds. Android 18's combat strength surged 50-fold, and Dujian didn't stand a chance. In all their sword clashes, he'd never been so thoroughly outmatched. The sheer, overwhelming force of her attack sent him hurtling through the air. Chapter 840, Sword Fight, Strength, Get the Hell Out of Here. Swordsmanship carries an almost mythical power. Belief itself becomes strength. As long as confidence endures, there is no ceiling to what a warrior can achieve. Yet in this instant, an unprecedented tremor ran through Ethan's heart. His rock-solid self-assurance cracked for the first time when faced with the absolute might of Superno 18. Every one of her blows carried the force to shake the stars, and today that force was ruthlessly testing the very foundation of his faith in the blade. Her punch didn't just smash through Ethan's defense, it obliterated his long-cherished certainty in his own abilities. Pain crashed over him like a merciless tide, dragging him into a sea of darkness and doubt. How is this possible? He gasped. The clang of steel echoed across the void, a trembling note of disbelief. Ethan had never imagined a day when he'd feel his limits so starkly. This wasn't just physical agony. It was a wound to his soul, a profound, soul-shaking doubt about the strength he'd always taken for granted. For a moment, Ethan's sword hovered immobile in the cold expanse of space, a lone silhouette against the infinite backdrop of stars and shadow. Ethan's eyes flickered with shock, confusion, stubborn defiance, and a flicker of fear. A white-hot agony seared through his right leg, a brutal reminder of the blow that had just felled him. He tried to shift, to push himself up, but each movement sent shards of pain stabbing through his nerves, as if thousands of needles were buried beneath his skin. All around him, the Shi'ar Empire's fleet had closed in. Their once proud formations now trembled. Initial confidence gave way to stunned disbelief. Swordmasters who had boasted of unmatched skill now stood rooted in place, wide-eyed, as if witnessing the collapse of everything they held dear. On the command deck, the officers' faces went ashen. They could not accept that their idol, the godlike Captain Du Jian, had been bested. "No, this is impossible," a young lieutenant cried, voice breaking. "Captain Du Jian, our pride, how could he fall so easily?" His words spread among the ranks like wildfire, igniting panic and despair. In moments, fear and hopelessness wove themselves into an invisible chain, binding every heart in trembling dread. For the Shi'ar Empire, swordsmanship is more than just a warrior's skill. It's the very embodiment of their faith. A defeat doesn't merely stain one man's honor. It deals a crippling blow to the spirit of the entire empire. And yet, at the nadir of his despair, a sudden spark ignited in Ethan's eyes. He raised his head and stared into the far-off glow of Super 18. Though it lay more than 100,000 meters away, he could still sense its trembling energy waves. Ethan did not flee, nor did he cower beneath the weight of failure. Instead, that moment of hopelessness kindled a fierce pride deep in his soul. How could he surrender so easily in a duel of blades, he swore to himself. With that unspoken vow, a tempest of resolve surged through his veins. Every cell seemed to awaken, answering the call of his will and coalescing into an unstoppable current of power. His eyes shone with unbreakable determination as he inhaled the universe's purest energy, as though drawing the cosmos into himself. Ethan drew in a slow, steady breath, his muscles coiling as if to trap every ounce of his frustration, anger, and past failures into one earth-shaking force. "All right, number 18, he growled. "Let me see what you've got." A fierce battle aura roared to life in his chest, and the air around him began to shiver with raw energy. Then a blinding radiance burst forth, signaling that Ethan's latent potential had finally been unleashed. That brilliant light didn't merely illuminate the battlefield, it broadcast to the universe that he was about to burn brighter than any star. He lifted his right fist, slick with sweat, trembling with resolve, as though he were hoisting the weight of creation itself. In that suspended moment, time seemed to stall, the distant stars flickered, and all existence waited with bated breath. Then came the thunderous crack. Ethan's fist rocketed forward like a blazing meteor, crackling with destructive power, hurtling straight for number 18. Ethan's punch wasn't just a display of raw power, it was his ultimate challenge, his bid to shatter every personal limit. Yet as his fist bore down on Superno 18, she responded with an almost supernatural calm. She closed her hands gently, and the blue and white energy swirling around her palms flared into a radiant pillar of light. That beam didn't merely withstand Ethan's all-out strike, it surged forward on its own momentum, sweeping away every obstacle in its path. What? Ethan's eyes went wide in stunned disbelief. He had poured every ounce of his skill into that attack, only to see it dissolved effortlessly. "This can't be real. No one can outmatch me in swordsmanship," he roared, a fire igniting in his chest. Defeat wasn't an option. This time, he vowed, he wouldn't just defeat her, he'd prove to the entire universe that he could never lose a sword fight. Fueled by unwavering conviction, energy surged through Ethan's body, more turbulent than ever. A liquid metal sheen rippled across his muscles, a testament to the sheer density of his power. His eyes blazed with an even more radiant light. His hunger for victory and relentless drive to transcend himself made them almost incandescent. "Come on," Ethan roared, his entire being suffused with unprecedented strength. He felt like a living god of war, each breath sending shockwaves through the air. Gathering every ounce of power and will, he thrust his fist forward again, infusing it with his boundless desire to win and his deepest fear of failure. Boom! The arena trembled under the force of his blow as Ethan's punch tore toward Super 18 with blistering speed and devastating impact. This strike was fiercer and more resolute than any before, embodying not just his quest for victory, but his determination to shatter every limit he'd ever known. This defies common sense, and even the law of conservation of energy. But Du Jian has proven by his actions that when belief and will are strong enough, no rule is unbreakable. Chapter 841, The Captured Swordsman. Ethan watched the duel intently. He's perfect for magnetic field rotation, or even a more chaotic power system, he murmured, noting how the swordsman's pure, focused technique mirrored Ethan's own power of thought. Without warning, Dujan let out a thunderous roar. "Drink!" he cried, as the sword's energy roared down his arm in a blinding torrent. The force was so immense that even Dujan hadn't fully anticipated its strength. It tore through space like a raging storm, warping reality and dimming distant stars in its wake. In that moment, he felt like a god of war, hammering forward with an indestructible fist aimed squarely at Super 18. Super 18, however, showed no sign of surprise. She'd seen countless transformations and power surges, and now she was transforming herself. A confident, almost wry smile curved her lips. "A 50-fold gap isn't so easy to close," she said. Then, lifting her fist high toward the sky, she unleashed a wave of energy, the likes of which the battlefield had never seen. The ground trembled beneath its brilliance as Super 18 prepared to meet Dujan's charge head-on. Ethan watched, transfixed, as an unimaginable surge of power burst from Super Number 18's fist, an energy so intense it seemed to draw in the very fabric of the cosmos. Space itself quivered, starlight dimmed beneath the radiance of her force. In that moment, Ethan's enhanced senses overloaded, spewing out impossible readings that contradicted every law he'd ever known. Super Number 18's power level had skyrocketed in an instant, an earth-shattering leap that defied all expectations. It was as if an unexplored universe had lain dormant within her, only now fully awakened. Even someone as formidable as Ethan found it hard to believe. His mind raced, grappling with data that made no sense. How is this possible?" he whispered, heart pounding. Ethan was well aware that unleashing power beyond one's limits usually carried a terrible cost, even the risk of one's life. Yet her transformation had come so smoothly, so effortlessly, that it felt less like a desperate last-ditch effort and more like a revelation of strength she'd always possessed but never revealed. Until now. Ethan staggered beneath Superno 18's crushing blow. The strike struck like a beam of pure destruction, enveloping him in a searing golden storm. Heat so intense, it felt as though his flesh were vaporizing, and a pressure so immense, it threatened to tear his very soul apart. He poured every ounce of strength into resisting, but the force was utterly beyond his capacity. With each impact, he was shoved farther back, the fire of his life flickering dangerously low. Fear and despair welled up in Ethan's chest, emotions he had never allowed himself to feel. For the first time, death's icy grip felt alarmingly close. His nearly invincible racial talent, the gift that had shaped his pride and prowess, proved utterly powerless against Supernova 18. Watching from the capital ship above, the Shia Empire's commanders exchanged grim looks. Their one hope lay in reclaiming the legendary battle sword, now in the enemy's hands. But with Supernova 18 standing guard, not even their elite forces dared to challenge him. Reluctantly, they gave the order to withdraw. As Shia battalions pulled back, the sector quietly fell under the Galactic Empire's control. And beneath the Golden Tempest, Ethan realized that this battle was only the beginning of a far greater war. Across the galaxy, the balance of power has shifted, and everyone's taking notice. Rumors raced through every star system. Even the Shi'ar Empire's legendary Royal Guard captain, the universe's undefeated master of the Blade, had fallen in single combat. Whispers ran wild. Is it true that Emperor Ethan of the Galactic Empire bested him? Yes, and remember, this is the same man who avenged Boro's death by crushing Thanos and obliterating the Dark Order. Ethan's triumph over two of the universe's greatest terrors has become cosmic legend. The very names Thanos and the Dark Order once struck fear into every corner of space. Now they only underscore the Galactic Empire's might. Few would dare challenge Ethan now. None, that is, except the proud Shi'ar. They never bowed to the Dark Order and dismissed Ethan's rise as overrated. They believed their Blade Masters invincible until a single duel proved otherwise. Now every world knows, the Emperor is not just powerful, he's unstoppable. Ethan surveyed the shattered remnants of the legendary fighting sword, Dujian, strewn across the chamber floor. Its raw power had earned it the Empire's utmost respect, and they'd gone to great lengths to secure it. Yet here it lay, broken and silent, as if too stunned to even resist. A soft hum announced Number 18's arrival at Ethan's side. When Esdeath came back, Ethan remarked, I knew you wouldn't be far behind. She inclined her head once. She never is. Ethan knelt beside the fragments. That blade was supposed to be unbeatable. No 18 offered a half-smile. Unbeatable? My untransformed strength already rivals a first-stage Super Saiyan. Even granting Dujian the lightning full-body cell boost, it couldn't last a second against me. Ethan's eyes narrowed. So you didn't even need to transform to finish it off? Nope. She stood, arms crossed, unconcerned. Dujian's final power surge barely reached Super Saiyan level. I ended it before it could think. Ethan shook his head in wonder. I still can't wrap my mind around how strong you are. No, 18's lips curved into a confident grin. This isn't bragging, it's fact, proven in every battle. Ethan watched the readings flicker on his holoscreen. Dujian's power level didn't quite surpass a Super Saiyan's, but it came alarmingly close. In a straight-up fight, even the Z-fighters would struggle. Her arsenal of abilities was vast, her resilience uncanny, and she was unpredictable enough to turn the tide at any moment. Why risk a head-on clash when he could simply neutralize her? It was far easier to contain than to conquer. He turned to Android 18, who stood coolly beside him. Want to see Dojian in action? 18 shook her head. No need. Ethan smiled. He'd already anticipated her reply. Dujian's physiology was unique, but not beyond his quantum replication system. The instant he scanned her, down to the molecular level, a perfect copy sprang into being. He dispatched the clone to locate the real Dojian, while his own Dojian, cured of whatever disturbances had plagued her, was discreetly relocated to a secluded villa. She wasn't shackled or behind bars, simply barred from crossing the property perimeter. Inside, she had every comfort and no sense of imprisonment. At first, Dojian brooded in the dimmed halls, haunted by her inability to break free. But after a few days, she shook off her doubt and emerged from her self-imposed shadow. She still saw no clear path to defeat Android 18, yet she refused to remain sidelined. Ready or not, her next move would define them both. I'd be happy to help. Could you please paste the full chapter text you'd like me to rewrite? Once I have the complete content, I'll transform it into a polished, coherent English version with Ethan as the main character.